I see Diva Hero.
What up, YouTube? It's your boy ATrueHero, here today with another banger. 21 Savage once said, "I'll be dropping bombs like Baghdad." And that's what this is, putting Diva Hero on the map yet again. For those of you who are new to the channel and wondering, who are you? I'm ATrueHero, and I've achieved more tops with this deck than any other duelist in the world. I'm your favorite Diva Hero player's favorite Diva Hero player. Now, with that said, I made a lot of innovation to this list, but if you're curious about why I chose certain cards, check out the deck profile. This video is going to be focusing on my tournament run. Now, a little bit of John's and shameless self-promotion. You have to understand, for those of my true fans, you know, my sets are played at times that are not convenient for me. So it's not a perfect run. There are definitely some misplays and mistakes. You guys can roast me all about them in the comment section below. But I want to see how sharp you can play at 6 a.m. in the morning when you just woke up. Secondly, for those of you who are interested in taking your game to the next level, if you really want to get your game on like Jade and Yuki, considering reaching out for tutoring. I obviously know a thing or two about Yu-Gi-Oh! And especially about Diva Hero and Black Wings. With all that said, let's get right into the video and go into round one.
Okay, so round one, I'm up against DJ. I don't even try to pronounce people's names anymore because unlike Korean names, which are clear, cut, and simple, American or Western names, the way one person says it, the way another person says it, it's completely different. So I have no idea what deck my opponent's on, but he goes set 2 back rows and a monster and passes. So immediately I read he has Dust Shoot because generally people don't set more than 1 back row unless they have Starlight Road, Solemn, or Dust Shoot. So my hand is quite awkward. He Dust Shoots me and sends away my only playable card, but it's okay. Since he has a set monster, generally in Edison format, the set monster is going to be like a Raikou or a Hamster. These days, with the popularity of frogs, it can also be a Treeborn Frog, Dupe Frog, but usually you're up against like a Vayu Turbo sort of deck, and it's going to be Raikou or Hamster. So I Sark for Rhoda because I have a monster shortage. My opponent continues to play passively, He sets a back row and passes. I still can't do anything. So now I draw, and finally I pull in a Rhoda. So I have two choices here. I can either Rhoda for Stratos to get another hero, or I can go aggressive. Now, like I said, my read is his set is a monster, a Raikou rather, because it hasn't done anything. So if I summon Stratos, add a guy, and attack over the Raikou, then the Raikou gets value. However, if I make Stardust and then attack, as long as my opponent doesn't have something like D-Prison, then my Stardust will prevent the Raikou from destroying any one of my cards. So I go for the Stardust play. I Rhoda for Greffer, I pitch, I special, no priority because Malicious is the only thing I really want to send, and I've already sent it to the graveyard. Now, DJ has a read that I'm going to make Stardust, which is why I believe he bottomlesses here. So it's quite a good bottomless because this was his only opportunity to do so, because now I'm about to make Stardust. So I banish Mali for Mali, summon Plague, Synchro into Stardust, Stardust swinging to his face down. My read was correct, and I can see that he's on zombies. Now, during the end phase, he activates MST, so I attribute Stardust to negate. And I thought my opponent was going to actually DD Crow my Stardust, but then he just says that he was drunk last night and that's why he's doing weird plays. So, props to me. Now, my opponent sets a back row, so I have a read that he's quite weak and he doesn't have D-Prison set. So I swing direct for 25, and this passes on for 2 turns, so I get 5k in with Stardust. And my hand's really good. I'm missing a water monster. A Deep Sea Diva would set it off because then I can go Diva into Gilman, make an Android, play Miracle Fusion. I even have the option to like Diva and then Brain Control, take one of their monsters. So Diva completely just makes this hand go crazy. However, my opponent activates Giant Trunade, so I know he's about to go for a big play here. Now, against zombies, generally, you do not want to leave your Plague Spreader in the graveyard because they have cards like Zombie Master. And Zombie Master can get a zombie monster from either player's graveyard. So there's argument here that I should have, a turn or so sooner, stacked for Plague and then sacked for Caius. However, I don't agree with that play because look at what I'm stacking into. This hand is not very good. And like I said, in order for it to be great, I need to draw into Deep Sea Diva. So my opponent goes summon Zombie Master. He does indeed take my Plague Spreader and is able to make Goyu Guardian. But with the hand that I have now, I'm not worried about him taking my Stardust. Now, I draw, and still I have quite a monster shortage, so now it's time to summon the Caius. So I stack a card for Plague, summon Caius, hit the back row, and thankfully it wasn't a chainable card like Bottomless. Now, the reason why I hit this back row, and the reason also why I hit the back row is because one Bottomless is in the graveyard. Now, the reason why this play is good is because now I get a free monster. Brain Control the Stardust, switch it to attack mode, and then activate Creature Swamp, taking the Goyu. So now the Goyu is permanently mine because he's Creature Swamp, and the Stardust is permanently mine as well because I took it with Goyu. Not to mention, this Stardust was originally mine, so if I use it to negate a destruction card, it'll come back to my side of the field. So now I can just set all 3 back rows and tell him he has to deal. His Brain Control is dead, he summons Mizuki and a Bottomless. That game was kind of over whether I Bottomless Mizuki or not. So, game 2, this time my hand is still a little awkward, but thankfully I do open up with Stratos. So I MST because I can't risk my opponent going pulling the rug on my Stratos, then my hand is completely dead. So I wrote it for Stratos and add Prodigy because Prodigy Caius is a great combo. I swing into the face down, and it's a Goblin Zombie. Thank goodness it wasn't a Pyramid Turtle. And set Bottomless and pass after Sarking, and Sarking for Brain Control. Now here, the reason why I start for Brain Control is because Brain Control combos well with Caius. But in hindsight, I should not have Sarked for Brain Control. I should have Sarked for Deep Sea Diva because I already have a card to combo with Caius, which is Infernal Prodigy. And not to mention, I need to get my deck's engine going as fast as possible. As you can see, I already have 2 heroes. I have Prodigy and Stratos, and no waters. So this Sark should have been for either Future Fusion or for a Deep Sea Diva, not Brain Control. Now, my opponent's turn, he goes summon Zombie Master, he goes pitch it, and he targets, obviously, Goblin Zombie and a Bottomless. And this is where a bit of a mishap happens. So actually, if you Bottomless Goblin Zombie when he does his effect, then his effect does not resolve. It's not like Lumina. But here, I was just out of it. That's just the only thing I can say. I was out of it, and I completely missed that. And this is an incorrect game state. What should have happened was, as I stated, he doesn't get anything, and then he banishes Mizuki, and then he can bring back his Goblin Zombie. And this actually affected a lot because now, since his Goblin Zombie's on the field when he otherwise would not have been unless he banished Mizuki, it makes me go into a Caius play. And now look, my opponent, we can see because it's the replay, he has Bottomless set. So had he not banished Mizuki and brought back Goblin Zombie, then I would have no reason to commit another monster to the field. And I can just keep attacking direct with Stratos, which is relevant because my opponent also has Gores, right? So one faulty game state due to my fault, right, caused a complete shift in what could have potentially been the outcome of the game. So anyway, as I mentioned, I sack for Caius and he bottomlesses, which opens up the opportunity for him to summon a Gores later on in the game. 2 turns pass, I draw on a Brain Control, and as you can see, my hand's really good, but I'm missing a water monster, so this should not have been Brain Control, right? As I stated previously, it should have been a Diva or a Future Fusion. And had it been either one of those cards, then this hand is amazing. So I just draw and pass, my opponent draws and passes, and you can see I have 3 cards that can take his monsters, right? I have Mind Control, Brain Control, Econ. So the moment he puts a monster on the field, like I can play the game with his own monsters. And Heavy Storm to make sure everything goes safely as well. Previously, it might have looked like I have Gores since I didn't commit any monsters to the board or any cards to the board. But eventually I did draw into my Gores, which is good. So now I feel safe. But look how awkward this hand is. I don't want to set any of these spells because they're not chainable. So it kind of makes Gores dead. And I don't want to set Prodigy either because this is a combo card. I can combo it with Diva, I can combo it with Caius, I can combo it with Plague, I can even combo it with Econ in my hand, right? There's so many ways that I can combo with Prodigy, but it's a little bit more difficult to do those combos if he's not in my hand. But I don't have a choice because if I set up the board in a way that I can't drop Gores, I will lose the game. So I set Prodigy and I pass, and now my opponent finally decides to do a play. He banishes Mizuki, brings out Goblin Zombie, and once again, faulty game state because this was already supposed to be used earlier in the duel. Now he summons Plague, and he's able to make Dark Rule Hades, which is really good for him. Now, thankfully, this isn't anything relevant. Like, yes, the Sky's effect will get negated because it was destroyed by Hades, but he's not doing anything. So Hades runs over this, and I'm completely fine with how that goes. And I draw yet another awkward card. So I think long and hard actually about this turn because there are a couple plays that I can do. Like I can go summon Dark Grepher, pitch Gore, send Plague, stack, Mind Control, attack, right? If he drops Gores, I can make Dark End. So there's like a couple plays that I can do. However, all those plays are too committal. They cause me to neg too much. And right now, I'm at a good place in that I have a lot of card advantage, right? So if you look at it, it's currently like 7-7. But I'm up in life points. So I don't want to do anything that's going to cause me to like lose advantage in this game state. Not to mention I went second. So the fact that we're even in cards is like really good for me. So I do something that's not typically seen. I actually play Brain Control as a burn spell. And the reason why I do this is because once again, I need to play to Gores because Gores is my win condition. And not to mention, he hasn't been committing cards to the board either. So if he does have Gores, he's going to drop it on this Hades because I've already normal summoned, so he doesn't have to worry about me dropping the Caius. So he does indeed drop his own Gores, and now I need to set some protection. So I really hoped that he would have dropped like his Gores in attack mode, and then I could have like did some more fancy tricks, but he didn't do that, so he put it in defense mode. Like one of the fancy tricks I could have done is like Econ take, attack one of his cards, and I could have made like Colossal Fight or something like main phase 2. But anyway, so now it's a bit awkward for me and I need to protect my life points. So I just set Econ so that I don't die. And Econ's chainable, so I can set it in a way that I can summon Gores. Not to mention, from his point of view, it could look like that I have Torrential Tribute. So he's not going to be too eager to commit more monsters to the board. So he switches his Gores to attack. He attacks, I take a little bit of damage. Activate Econ here, switching his Hades that already attacked to defense mode. And now I'm able to drop Gores and a 27 token, which is really good, right? Especially considering he's at 2850 and I have Heavy Storm, right? Once again, if I pull a Deep Sea Diva, it's over because I can Mind Control his Hades. I can play Miracle Fusion, Heavy Storm any of his back rows. Like, a Diva sets this hand off even later on into this game. Now, my opponent sees that I don't have any back rows, so now he's able to commit more cards to the field, and he summons Diva of his own. And here's where he does a bit of a misplay. So he actually makes Darken Dragon, but look at his hand. He has Regeki Break and Deep Prison. So I actually think in this situation, it would have been better just to make Stardust, because Stardust can protect both of these back rows. So here, yes, Darken does clear my 27/27 token, but I feel like a Stardust behind 2 back rows is like really hard to beat. Not to mention, he still has a 2700 Gores, so his field is like quite broken. And I don't know why, but he puts his Darken in defense mode as well, which is also a bit of a misplay on his behalf. So he Book of Lives, and here he makes Brio, and he returns the Gores back to my hand. So it's just a lot of awkward plays here, and he sets both back row and he passes. Now, also, what he could have done too is the weakness of Diva Hero. I've said many times before, especially in the video How to Beat Diva Hero, is Falsodyna. So it's just like, he could have also just summoned Falsodyna, and then, you know, I would be in a really oppressed situation because I've already used Brain Control. So the only way that I can get over Falsodyna is, there's almost no way actually, because if you look at my grave, I've also used Dark Grepher and Stratos, and those are the typical normal summons that can run over Falsodyna in Diva Hero. So I feel like kind of like lack of awareness here kind of lost him the game, because even if I do Heavy Storm and he's unable to make Stardust because he normal Dyna instead of normal summon Diva, like I can't do much afterwards. The best I could do is like normal summon a guy, run over Falsodyna, but then I'm still dealing with like his field. So definitely inexperienced in the matchup, but it happens. So I'm able to actually Heavy Storm because he didn't make Stardust and clear both of his back rows. So I mean, there were 2 different plays he could have done last turn, right? He could have made Stardust or he could have summoned Falsodyna. Both would have been better than this, unfortunately. And now I Mind Control the Brio because it's a water monster, so I can actually use it for Miracle Fusion, but it's also a level 6, which is kind of better. I don't have to worry about Gores because Gores is right here, so Diva get Gilman, and then I can actually just Brio, bounce the token, make a level 8 here, make Colossal Fighter. Miracle, 0 is going to be at 3000. Ask for the thumbs up just in case he has DD Crow. Thankfully he doesn't, so Banish, make 0. 0's at 3k. So Gilman can run over this Dark End. So once again, I'm not sure why this was in defense mode. And then he just scoops. So that's round 1. Definitely a bit of kind of, you know, misplays on both our parts, right? Like, I definitely should have called the bottomless zombie situation, zombie master situation, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh! That's how it goes. And yeah, on to the next, round 2.
Okay, round 2. I'm up against Meditating, a name I can actually pronounce. And I'm 0-2 in die rolls, so I'm up against Black Wings, and of course, Dueling Book gives him the perfect hand, Whirlwind Shora. So as you can see, my hand's actually not bad, but I don't have a way to put a hero and a water in the graveyard on the first turn, so it's going to take me time to set up, and it's quite difficult to set up against Whirlwind Shora. So my opponent does that, sets a back row, and passes after alluring, and I draw into the second Diva, which isn't bad because now I have the option of going Diva Diva and also Diva Gilman. Now here, what I decide to do is actually set Defender and set Bottomless. The reason why I actually have to set both is because if I just set Defender, I know that he has Kalut in his hand. So on his following turn, if he sees that I don't have any back rows, he can go normal summon Kalut, add Gale, special Gale, make Brio pitch, and then I take 18, 23, and if he had like a Sirocco in his hand as well, then it can get real nasty because he can go Banish, Vayu, Sirocco, like just so many things can go wrong. Not to mention, if I just set Defender, and even if his hand isn't like quite strong, and he just has another normal summon, then he'll get another plus off of Whirlwind. So I'm kind of forced to go set Defender and set a back row. Now, this also baits out Icarus, which is really good because then if I go for a push later, I don't have to worry about getting Icarus attacked. And that's exactly what happens during the end phase. So I'm completely fine with that trade, trading a Bottomless and a Defender for a Shora and an Icarus. Now on his turn, he goes once again, Whirlwind Shora. Like, it's crazy, bro. So he attacks direct with 18. He sets a back row and ends his turn. Now here, if you look at my hand, I actually have the Diva Hero OTK. And in hindsight, I should have went for it. The reason why I didn't go for it is because at the time, this back row was unknown to me. And if this back row is anything real at all, Icarus Attack, Mirror Force, D-Prison, etc., I lose. Reason being, if I make Brionic, I don't have enough cards in my hand to pitch to send both Shura and the back row back to my hand. It's one or the other. So because he has Whirlwind up and he's already gotten +2 off of Whirlwind from the 2 Shura normal summons, at this point, I can't win a fair game. And I don't have any back rows either, as you can see. The only back row I pulled into was bottomless. So no matter what, he can summon Gale, or Shura, not Shura, rather, Quilute next turn because he still hasn't used it. And then add Gale, Special Gale, make Brionic. So my field is completely irrelevant, even if I make a field of like Zero, Stardust, etc. So I should just go for game with this hand. And had I went for game with this hand, we can see his back row is a brain control, so I would have won. But once again, when you're playing under pressure and like you analyze the situation without having to see all the cards your opponent has, then you can see that it's quite a risky play. But considering the fact that I didn't have any back rows, it was worth going for. So instead of going for game, I decided to go for both Stardust and Goyu Guardian, and then I make 0. So my plan here was to bait out the Quilute. However, I know that he has double Quilute because he normal summon Shura twice. My hand here plan was to bait out the Quilute, which I was able to do. And then he also gets a plus because Shura still gets the effect here. So it's just like even now, because I know he has a Quilute in his hand, this board just gets erased. So once again, that's just all the more reason why I should have just went for game. But you know, hindsight is 20/20. So we attack direct with both, and this Diva is still live because I can get Spine Gilman next turn. And now my opponent flips up his face down brain control. He doesn't even have to go for the Brionic play because now he can do something way more broken. So his end board is pretty much impossible to break unless I draw a Miracle Fusion. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. Instead, I drew a Rhoda. So I'm in a kind of a tight spot. So I Rhoda for Stratos, and with Stratos I add Spine Gilman. So obviously this is a misclick. And even he said, "Hey, what did you add?" And I was like, "Oh, my bad. I meant to add Prodigy." Like I was so out of it because I already knew that this game was over. So anyway, Stratos attacks his Shura. He goes summon Quilute finally, special summons Gale, and before he even makes the synchro, I just scoop it up because that game is a lost cause. I had one chance to win and I didn't go for it. So now game 2, this hand is okay. It's not the greatest hand, but at least I can stop a summon with Torrential. So I decide to just set Torrential and pass, and I do get value 1-for-1 off the Torrential. I don't know why he didn't activate MST because he has both MST and Heavy Storm in his hand. So definitely he could have just went Space. I mean, you still have Heavy Storm. So, but anyway, so my Torrential was able to get value there, and I draw a D-draw for turn, which is quite nice. So we D-draw the Diamond Dude, and we draw into our second Diva. So second game in a row where we pulled double Diva. And at this point, I have to finally put damage on the board. So I go summon Diva, get Gilman, synchro into Android. Now, at this point, I do have the option of actually playing a Miracle Fusion and then hitting them direct with 49. But I want to save Miracle Fusion for like my get out of jail free card. Like if something goes wrong. For example, if he drops Gores, or if next turn he goes like Whirlwind Shura, then I can like go Miracle Fusion, then I can like sacrifice to 0 for Caius and then clear his board. So I save the Miracle Fusion just in case things get bad unexpectedly. We attack direct for 24. Thankfully for no Gores, so we gain 600 during the end phase. He goes Sirocco, set 2. So now, of course, I go summon Caius to play around the Quilute. Hit the Sirocco, it goes through. We attack and we get prisoned. So because we got prisoned here and this Caius summon didn't get bottomless, then obviously that means he doesn't have bottomless set. This back row is something else, right? We don't know what it is, but it can't stop a summon. So now's the perfect time to summon Absolute Zero. Now, of course, the back row could have been Royal Oppression, but if the back row is Royal Oppression, then there's nothing I can do about that. Thankfully, it wasn't, so we're able to successfully summon Zero, and we just passed because it's main phase 2. And now we can see that actually my opponent is in a bad spot. He sets 2 back rows. There's no reason to play into Icarus attack, so we just attack, and he just takes damage. Now he has double Blizzard in his hand, which is quite nice. But the problem is, even with Double Blizzard, he can't get around like Absolute Zero smoothly, right? He can make Goyu, but then he loses his Goyu Guardian. He can make Brio, but that would be terrible because then he would lose both his power cards, Double Blizzard. So instead, he just decides to normal summon Blizzard and bring back Bora, because this way he can Icarus attack and it won't be too much of a minus if he has to. Now I draw into Heavy Storm, which is amazing because if he chains Icarus to this Heavy Storm, he loses his whole field. Heavy will take out all his back rows and Zero will take out all his monsters. So that's the play that I go for, and I was right, he did have the Icarus. So now I'm in a really good spot, right? So unfortunately with this hand, I can't do 38 points of damage. Even if I were to go like special summon Greffer by pitching Caius and then normal summoning Deep Sea Diva, like unfortunately I've already used Fine Gilman, right? So I can make a level 8, but there's no level 8 plus an additional 200 from Diva that can do 3,800 points of damage in my extra deck. So instead I just decide to slow play it, summon Greffer to get him weak, and then main phase 2, I can actually pitch this Caius because I don't need it anymore, because I can just send Malicious instead. And as long as I don't draw Malicious on the following turn, I'll be able to make a level 8, and that should put him in a pretty tight spot. Plus I have Lightning Vortex to cover any monsters that he summons during his turn. So I go for that play, and from this point in the duel, for the rest of this game, he draws every single card that he needs at the perfect time. So the first perfect card that he drew was D-Prison, okay? So let's watch and find out how this series of events plays out. So he goes summon Goyu, and then Goyu take my Greffer. Now at this point, I was praying and hoping that he had like a Blackwing in his hand, like Sirocco or Vayu, and then he would go like Greffer's effect main phase 2, pitch, and then send, because then I can just activate Lightning Vortex. And if I go Lightning Vortex and then make a level 8, it's game. However, unfortunately for me, he didn't have that, and instead he had a back row. So with this hand, I'm like, all right, that's fine. I no longer need Prodigy, so I can just go for game here by making a Stardust, because if that back row is a Bottomless, Mirror Force, obviously I can't play around Torrential, but if it's Bottomless or Mirror Force, right, so that can be any one of 3 cards. Plus, he's already used 1 D-Prison, so the odds of this card being another D-Prison are lower. So I go for this play. So I Vortex, clear his field, and I make Stardust. I actually don't activate Diva's effect for 2 reasons. 1, I don't want to just have a Diva on the field as a sitting duck. And 2, more importantly, I don't want to succumb to pulling the rug, right? There's no reason to activate Diva's effect if you don't have to. However, unfortunately, despite the fact that this card has a higher chance of being Bottomless or Mirror Force, it's D-Prison. So now I lose my Stardust, okay? So I'm still quite up in life points, and I have a Snowman Eater to keep me safe, so I'm not too worried. And thankfully, when I look at his grave, he has 4 darks instead of 3, so I don't even have to worry about a Dark Arm top deck. Now, his second amazing draw in a row was Solemn, because he draws Solemn and then I draw Miracle, so I'm going to go for game. I play Miracle and then he flips Solemn. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I'll just set Snowman Eater as protection. And then what does he draw? Torrential, okay? So then I draw and I'm like, all right, this is going to be game here. Summon Stratos, Stratos effect to search, and he hits me with Torrential. So I search out Defender, right? Because Defender is actually my last hero, because I've already gone through Prodigy, I've gone through both Maliciouses, and the Diamond Dude is banished. So this is my last hero, okay? So not the best hero to have because I've already used D-Draw, but still Defender's not terrible because he works perfectly if I draw a Caius. So now my opponent here, he draws Bottomless, and speak of the devil, I draw a Caius. So I'm like, all right, this is perfect. So next turn, I can go for game. So now my opponent draws Kalut, and I draw Future Fusion, which is dead. Because just like I said previously, this is my last hero. So this Future Fusion is just a dead card. I still have Waters, right? Like Treeborn, but I don't have any more heroes, so the card doesn't do anything. So I just like, all right, I'm going to go for game, right? So I sack, I go for game, and it's Bottomless. I'm like, okay, sure. So now I'm still at the mercy of anything that he does. He draws into Icarus, he sets it, I draw into Dark Arm, and obviously, Dark Arm's dead. All right, way too many darks. So my second dead card in a row. Now he draws into Brain Control, so it's good. He's starting to make a slow comeback, and he still had enough life points to activate it successfully. I draw on the Bottomless, which is quite a good draw here because he hasn't pulled many of his level 4 or higher Blackwings. He's only pulled 1 Bora and 1 Sirocco. So I set Bottomless, and he draws into Shora. He sets it. I draw into Plague, which is also dead here. And I don't want to risk setting it because of the odds of it becoming Bora food, Shora food, etc. Like so many things can go wrong. So he flips up Shora, I go bottomless, and then he goes Whirlwind Kalute. So now I'm in a really bad spot because if I don't get rid of this Whirlwind, and I have no way to get rid of the Whirlwind because I've already used Heavy Storm. So aside from MST, like that's the only way I could clear Whirlwind, then I'm in a bad spot. But I draw, finally, a good card for turn, which is Brain Control. So I'm like, all right, well, we're just going to go for game here. So we activate Brain Control, and he realizes that this is game. So he goes Chain Icarus, targeting my Brain Control that's on the field and his own Black Whirlwind. So that's kind of like a double-edged sword because, you know, or bittersweet, because on the one side, like now his Whirlwind's cleared, but on the other side, I have pretty much 3 dead cards in my hand. So now I realize that he's quite weak. So I decide like, well, I still have a potential chance to draw like a Caius. And even if I don't draw a Caius, if I draw a monster, then I could go like stack for Plague, make a Synchro, and the Synchro that I make can likely deal 1050 damage. So I set Plague and I pass. Now my opponent, he has a read that this is a Snowman Eater because as you can see, I decided into Snowman Eater against the Blackwing matchup. So he goes for a really interesting play. Summon Blizzard, bring back Kalute, special summon Gale, and now he can make a level 6, he makes Armwing, and he makes Stardust. So that is a lot of cards put into a Stardust. And it was just a Plague, right? So he goes, set a back row, and he passes. And I draw into a dead card. So I don't even set it because what's the point of setting a Mirror Force against a Stardust? Not to mention, by doing this, it plays as though I have Gores in my hand. So I draw, and then I quickly end. And my opponent, he has a read that I have Gores, so on his turn, he draws, and he doesn't attack, which is great because that bought me time. So now on my turn, I draw into my win con, which is Return. So because he's already used Heavy Storm and MST, likely the only other Spell and Trap Destruction that he has is Dust Tornado. But people generally don't side Dust Tornado against Diva Hero, so I'm pretty much safe to set my Return from a Different Dimension. But just in case like things go wrong, I set 2 back rows and I pass. So I set 2, and then he attacks the wreck for 25, he sets a back row and he ends. And now I flip up the world's greatest return, and I bring back everything. Stardust, Caius, Diamond Dude, and Deep Sea Diva. So I just make Brionic, and I go priority, return all 3 of your cards, and that's the game. So despite everything, I managed to clutch that one out and win. And that brings us to game 3. So if you look at my game 3 hand, this hand is terrible. It's not very good at all. So, I mean, spoiler alert, I did win this round, so I managed to somehow win despite not having the best of hands. So my opponent, he just sets a back row and he passes, and I draw into Rhoda. So this is really good because now my hand's explosive. Because if I Rhoda for a Greffer, I can go like Pitch Molly, Special Summon Greffer, Normal Summon Diva, Effect, and make a level 6 and a level 8, which is like really, really strong. However, I don't go for that play because it loses to Royal Oppression, right? So I don't want to put myself in a position where I can lose to Royal Oppression. Not to mention, not only does that play lose to Royal Oppression, but it's not game. It's a committal play that's not game. So Diva Hero, sometimes you're put in a situation where you have to make committal plays and use a lot of your cards. And more times than not, it's worth it if the play is going to be for game, right? But this committal play would not be for game, so it's not even worth it. So I look at my hand, and the only starter that I have is Diamond Dude. Of course, I have the option of going Rhoda for Stratos as well, but like, what would that add in this situation that's relevant? Like, I guess technically I can add a Prodigy because Prodigy and Caius pair, and Prodigy and Deep Sea Diva also pair together too. But once again, I'm thinking it's best to use this Rhoda for Dark Greffer. So instead, I just decide to use the starter in my hand, which is Diamond Dude, and whittle down his life points just a little bit. And next turn, I can go for the Greffer play, and I can deal game. So that way, when I do go for this committal play, it's for game, and it's not for just, you know, a situation in which I would be sad afterwards. So anyway, summon Diamond Dude, activate the effect, and luckily, I hit Brain Control. As soon as I hit Brain Control, in my mind, I knew I won. Because now, if he commits any cards to the board, I can just Brain Control and take it. And just like I said before, I just need to do a little bit of damage, and then with this hand, I can go for OTK. So I was so thankful. And one thing that you should know about Diamond Dude is that when he hits a spell, you don't have to pay the cost. So that means like cards like Brain Control, where you have to pay 800 normally, I don't have to because that's the cost. And one of the best cards to hit with Diamond Dude, of course, outside of Brain Control and Heavy Storm, is D-Draw. Because D-Draw, the cost is discarding a Destiny Hero monster. So if you go Diamond Dude and you hit D-Draw, on your next turn, you can just draw 2 cards for free. Just like that. So Diamond Dude, he's so good. He's so good when he hits spells. So anyway, I attack direct for 14. The attack goes through, which is perfect. And now my opponent goes off. Now looking at his hand is broken. So he goes Summon Sirocco, Pump, Half, Attack. I take a lot of damage. And here he makes Thought Ruler and he passes. And I draw into D-Draw. So the thing that you should also know about Diamond Dude's effect is actually Thought Ruler. So Diamond Dude and Thought Ruler. This is a very interesting interaction. Thought Ruler says when a spell or trap card is activated, then you can pay 1,000 to negate and destroy it. So actually, I'm not activating Brain Control in this scenario. So I can Brain Control this guy and Thought Ruler can't do anything about it. And once again, I don't even have to pay any life points. But just to kind of confirm everything, I called the judge to make sure. And the judge ruled in my favor. So that's the way that is ruled. But before it even got to that point, I actually had 2 choices with this hand. On one point, I could have went Rhoda for Grepher and pitch Molly, special summon Grepher, and then go for the play that I said earlier, and it would have been game. Or I was like, I can dig into the deck and see if I can draw into a Heavy Storm. Because what I wanted to do was like, if I draw like MST or Heavy Storm, some kind of back row destruction, then I don't have to lose to whatever that back row could be, right? Be it Torrential or Royal Oppression or even a Bottomless, right? Because Bottomless can stop the Grepher special summon. Of course, I would still be able to make like a level 8 and then go Brain Control. But if I go like level 8 Brain Control, then I can't go for game. So I was like, all right, I'm going to de-draw the Molly so I can dig into the deck. Unfortunately, I did not draw into Spell and Trap Destruction, but I drew into the Grepher. But now the Grepher is kind of like not as useful because I've already discarded the Molly, but he still has some use because I can special summon him with Caius. So I think long and hard about what to do here. And ultimately, I decide to get rid of the back row like this. I go Banish Molly for Molly, and then I can go Rhoda for Stratos. Summon Stratos, activate Stratos' first effect to pop a back row. Hit his back row, and it was just an Icarus attack. Pitch Caius, special summon Grepher. Pitch Pitch Plague, Diamond Dude out the deck. Stack a card. Make a level 8, get my free Brain Control, and all attack. Attack, game. And this is over, 66. So despite everything, even though I opened up really, really mid game 3, Diamond Dude came in clutch. So all I can say is, guys, believe in your heroes, and they'll believe in you. And with that, on to the next, round 3. Okay, so round 3, I'm up against Skynoon, and once again, I lose the RPS. So if you've been following me so far, I am 0-3 in RPSs. Haven't won a single one yet this tournament. Now, I look at my opening hand, and this is probably one of the worst hands to play against Lightsworns. For one, I have MST and Heavy Storm, which are dead. I have a Treeborn Frog, which is not helpful, and I drew in a Spine Gilman. So pretty much 4 cards are dead. And even Gold Sark, as amazing as it is, against Lightsworns, you might not have 2 turns. So this hand is just completely awful in normal standards, but especially awful against Lightsworn. So I think long and hard about what to do here because I have 2 choices. I can either summon Gilman and Crash, or I can normal summon or set Treeborn. Now, one reason why I would normal summon Treeborn is to play around Aaron, because obviously I have Caius in my hand, and Caius and Treeborn, they pair well together. So if I get Treeborn to the grave, I can bring him back on the standby phase and tribute for Caius. So I think long and hard about what to do, and ultimately I decide to actually set Treeborn and set Heavy Storm. And the reason why I do that, there's actually 2 reasons. One is because let's say that I'm unlucky in the fact, and of course Rhoda for Future Fusion. Not Rhoda, Sark for Future Fusion. And the reason why I do this is because if he does have Aaron, and he summons Aaron and returns Treeborn back to the deck, I Sark for Future Fusion, so I can send Treeborn with Future Fusion. And the reason why I set this Heavy Storm is because my hand is weak. And I want him to switch Lila to defense mode. That way I can summon Spine Gilman the next turn and run over the Lila. So by doing this play, it plays around him, one, potentially having an Aaron. And even in, let's say, like he has Celestia in his hand, right? And he goes like, sack for Celestia. A Celestia for a Heavy Storm that's not useful against Lightsworn and a Treeborn is a really good trade. So this is the play that I decided to go with turn 1. And he does indeed go switch, hits Heavy Storm, which I was really happy about because that's exactly what I anticipated. And I kept MST over Heavy. The reason why I kept MST over Heavy is because against Lightsworns in particular, MST is better than Heavy Storm. Because the back rows that they play usually are chainable. So they play cards like Threatening Roar or Beckoning Light. Some of the versions play the trap card that's like Call of the Haunted. Some of them play just Call of the Haunted. And against all those cards, MST is better. Because if they activate the Call of the Haunted card, I can just chain it. If they have a set Beckoning or a set Threatening Roar or even like Mirror Force, I can just go end phase, hit it. So MST is much more versatile in the matchup than compared to Heavy Storm. Now, my opponent draws into Recharge, and he activates it, and he draws into a Celestia. Now, of course, I don't know this at the time because I can't see his hand during the actual match, but I see that he mills a wolf, and I'm just thinking, it's going to be one of those games. Because I'm already like in a really bad spot, and the fact that he milled a wolf did not help. So he goes sack for Celestia, which is what I anticipated. He hits a Treeborn, so like I said, I'm completely okay with that trade. I did not anticipate on taking an additional 21 points of damage. And then he even goes Pot of Avarice to like kind of rub salt into the wound. So he's in a really strong spot, and my hand's like quite weak. So he draws 2, and then with that, he ends his turn. Now, because he ends his turn, from my position, I have a read that he has Honest. Because first turn, he just summoned Lila. He hasn't committed anything to the field, right? He hasn't set any monsters. He hasn't set any back rows. So I have a read that he has Honest. So I bring back Treeborn. I sack for Caius. I hit the Celestia, and I pass. Because let's say that he has Honest, right? I go attack into his wolf. He goes Honest. I take 21. On his turn, he goes attack again, and that's game. So if he has Honest, then I lose on the spot. So I can't afford to attack into his wolf just yet. So I set a back row kind of like as a bluff. And also, like I said, I can hit Threatening Roar, which he actually just drew for turn. Something like that during the end phase. He goes Heavy Storm. He hits my back row. And then he goes sack for Celestia. Which is unfortunate because once again, you know, if you have perfect knowledge, then I would have just went Caius attack over the wolf, and then none of this would have happened. But you don't have perfect knowledge in Yu-Gi-Oh! You just have to make reads, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game of reads. So now I'm in a really bad spot. I take 23, so I'm at 13. He sets a back row, and I finally get my Future Fusion, right? So I go Future Fusion after bringing back Treeborn during the standby. Accidentally, I send 2 darks. I send Malicious and Prodigy. I meant to send Diva instead. So I go Diva, get Diva, and everything's going through. I banish here, and here I think about what level 8 to make. So as I said previously, I have a read that he has Honest. So the only way I can play around an Honest is by making a Dark End. So I make Dark End. Now, because my life points are so low, honestly, I should have just made, honestly, I should have just made Thought Ruler. Because if he has Honest, I'm going to lose anyway, right? Let's say that I make Dark End and I send, sure. It plays around Honest for 1 turn. But if he draws any Lightsworn monster with an attack of 13 or higher, all he has to do, because I have no back rows, all he has to do is summon said Lightsworn monster, attack, Honest, game. So at this point, since I'm going to lose to Honest either way, I might as well at least try to gain some life and make Thought Ruler. Now granted, an attack on Thought Ruler wouldn't have worked because he did have Threatening Roar. And once again, hindsight's 2020. So I go for the Dark End play. The attack goes through. He takes 21, and he goes Pot of Avarice again. So this is the second Pot of Avarice that he's resolved this turn, and he just ends his turn by setting the back row and setting a monster. So I have no idea what he has set, right? It could be anything from Mirror Force to Torrential to Threatening Roar. So I don't want to commit too many cards to the board. So I think about what to do. I decide to send as the first step. I send Necro, which is smart by him, right? It doesn't make sense to set a card like Raikou when he sees that I have a Darken on the board. I swing direct for 16. He goes Roar. So main phase 2, just like I said, I need to gain life. So I summon Gilman. He has no response, and I make Magical Android. Now, once again, this goes back into what I was saying about if I made Thought Ruler, perhaps this game would have played out differently. Because now during the end phase, I'm getting 600. But if I had Thought Ruler, let's say he even roared that attack over Celestia. But on this turn, if I have both Thought Ruler and Android, during my end phase, I don't gain 600, I gain 1200. And that becomes quite relevant. Because here on this turn, he goes Summon Jane, attack, and like he wouldn't have been able to Jane beat over this Thought Ruler. So it's like a domino effect, right? So I would have more life points. He would mill. Now Zero comes out here, and I go for Stratos' first effect, because this back row has been sitting there a while and it hasn't done anything. And this new back row that he activated was Threatening Roar. So I have a read that this is actually Mirror Force. So I go Stratos' first effect. And unfortunately for me, it was another Threatening Roar. And then he draws into Recharge. He recharges and he draws into Honest. So Jane's going to go up to 21. And as you can see, I'm at 2000. So that's game. So really, it just came down to the matter of me making Dark End over Thought Ruler. And I should have made Thought Ruler. But, you know, when you go through your replays and you have perfect knowledge, it's easy to see what you should and shouldn't have done. But definitely I can say, even without perfect knowledge, the fact that I would have lost to Honest anyway, I should have made Thought Ruler. So that's game one. Game one, well played by Skynoon, and he's able to take me out. So now game two, right? Game two, I open up really weak, but at least I have both Dust Shoot and Mirror Force. And Dust Shoot is a godsend against Lightsworn. So I think long and hard about what to do, and I ultimately decide to go Summon Diva, get Gilman, set Dust Shoot, and set Mirror Force. The reason why I don't make a Catastor here is because, let's say I make Catastor and he goes set Raikou, then on my turn I have to tribute the Catastor for a Caius, right? But if I just keep this field as is and he goes sets a Raikou, I can go sack for Caius, hit the Raikou, and then I can make Stardust. And let's say that he summons a monster and he attempts to attack over my Diva or Gilman, then I have Mirror Force. So with this hand, instead of making a Synchro, the better play is just keeping both monsters on the board, because I have a way to follow up no matter what he does, whether he summons a monster and attempts to beat over, or if he sets a monster. So I go for that play, I Dust Shoot him, and I can see his hand is really weak, okay? So he doesn't have anything that he can do. Whether he summons a guy, I'm just going to stick to the play that I just explained. Mirror Force if he tries to beat over it. And if he sets Raikou, I'll Caius it. So he decides to summon Jane, he attacks, activate Mirror Force. So I draw for turn, I draw into Prodigy, activate a Lure. Unfortunately, I cannot draw into a Miracle Fusion here. So I think long and hard about what's going to be most useful here. And I realize that Caius is more useful than Gorz in this situation because his hand is so weak that I'm never really going to get a chance to drop this Gorz. So I banish Gorz, I summon Prodigy, Synchro into Armory Arm, attack for 35, main phase 2, Sark, and here in this situation, the card that's going to help me the most is Future Fusion. Future Fusion or Miracle Fusion, they're both good. But I chose Future Fusion because I can send both Mali and Treeborn because I haven't drawn to either one of those cards yet. So I set Bottomless, and right now I have complete knowledge of his entire hand. And he draws into the Lila that was shuffled back, right? The Dueling Book glitch is like crazy, bro. But anyway, I'm completely fine with that because now I can just Bottomless this Lila and I have complete knowledge of his hand. So he takes another 35, and 35 is 7,000. So I'm able to just summon Caius, banish himself for a game. So I didn't open up that strong, but the power of Dust Shoot wins me game 2. Now, game 3, unfortunately, I draw into Spine Gilman. So I just want to point out, game 1, I drew into Gilman, and game 3, I drew into Gilman. I wish that I drew like Dark Arm Dragon as often as I drew Gilman. Like, it's crazy. The Dueling Book algorithm is so crazy. I'll never understand it. But this hand is not very good. Anyway, my opponent goes first, summon Lila, sets a back row, mills 3, and I draw into this hand. I'm like, okay, now this is playable because this hand has a lot of power, and not to mention I can even stack the Gilman if need be and send it to the deck. So, and Sark for a broken card. So I'm like, okay, not the best hand, but like definitely playable. So first step, pitch, special summon, and he immediately flips up Iron Wall. But the thing is, you have to know how Yu-Gi-Oh works, right? So if I special summon Greffer, the summon of Greffer actually does not start a chain. So because it doesn't start a chain, I have turn player priority to activate a card effect, which means I can banish Malicious before my opponent has a chance to respond with Imperial Iron Wall. This is also the case with DD Crow as well. So if I go pitch Mali, special summon Greffer, you cannot, you being the opponent, cannot DD Crow the Malicious before I decide to pass priority. So here I actually have priority on 2 monsters. I have priority to activate Dark Greffer's effect, to pitch as cost and send, or I have priority to banish Malicious for Malicious. So I mean, obviously, because of the order of events, and I saw that this was Iron Wall, I'm going to use my priority to banish Malicious. So I banish Mali, Special Summon Mali, normal summon, I make Colossal Fighter. And at this point, I'm hoping and praying to God that he has Honest, right? Because from my perspective, it looks like he has Honest. And the reason why I'm hoping and praying to God that he has Honest is because if he Honest is here, he loses. Because this is what would happen. I'll go Colossal Attack into his Lila, and he'll go Honest. Colossal's going to come back at 3,000. And then what I can do is I can activate Enemy Controller, and I can tribute my Dark Grepher to take his Lila. And Lila is going to be at attack points of 47 because a 3,000 boost from Honest, right? Plus her 17. So she's going to be at 47. So I can attack direct with his Lila for 47. And then Colossal is going to be actually at 31 because Grepher will be in the grave. So attack direct with 31 and 47. Okay. So that's actually a total of 78. So he'll be at 200 life points. Plus I have Plague in the grave. So then I can go main phase 2, switch Lila, pop his own Imperial Iron Wall, and then synchro into like a Brionic because he can't brain control or anything like that. So I'm praying to God that he has Honest, because if he has Honest, I win on the spot. I win on the spot. Plus he doesn't have 4 names, so we wouldn't be able to drop JD. Like the game is just over. But the one time I actually want my opponents to have Honest, they don't have it. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. So there's no point in actually making any committal plays here. I don't want to make Brionic because if I make Brionic and he has brain control, then I just lose my whole field. And I don't want to make Goyu either because Goyu is not going to do much in this situation against a card like Honest, right? Or even a Raikou. So I just decided to keep this field as is. I start for brain control because I don't see a single way that he can win if I have brain control in my hand. It's worth noting that you can not activate Gold Sarcophagus when Imperial Iron Wall is on the field. This was a careless mistake by myself, and I was punished and received a warning for it. Plus I have Econ, which is like a soft brain control. So I'm like so confident that this game is over. Now my opponent summons Lumina, pitches Garoth for Garoth, runs over my Grepher. I'm completely fine with that. And he mills 5. I'm hoping he doesn't mill a Lightsworn during the end phase, and he doesn't. And I draw on the Sangan. So I summon Sangan, and once again, I'm hoping to God that he has Honest. Because if he has Honest, I can do a similar play like I mentioned before. So I summon Sangan, and then I decide to stack. And the reason why I stack here is because he has Iron Wall. So that means I can keep using Plague's effect over and over and over again. Not to mention I can get the Gilman that I drew out of my hand and search out a Deep Sea Diva. So I do this, and I make Magical Android. And I make Android over Catastrophe because the purpose is for him to activate Honest. Plus, if I gain life points, this can prevent me from losing to like a random double JD job if the game gets to that point later on. So I search out a Deep Sea Diva. I go Colossal Attack into the Lumina because this would be the card he would protect if he has Honest, and he doesn't have Honest again. And I go Android over the Garoth. So I'm in a really strong situation, and I just in phase gain 6. He reminds me about the 100 from Grepher, and I am. So now in his turn, he goes summon Arcus, which is like really unfortunate for me because I start for brain control and I get it next turn. And obviously I can't brain control or econ this Arcus. Now I do have the option to go summon Diva, get Gilman, and make Catastor and attack over that guy. But like I want to keep Deep Sea Diva in my hand to pair with econ if it comes to that point. So instead, what I decide to do, so I draw Soul Release, which is really good, but unfortunately I can't activate it now. I can, but you can't target Lightsworns, including in the graveyard, right? So I just decide to think about what to do. I'm like, okay, as long as this back row isn't something like Threatening Roar, actually I have game. Because what I can do is I can go stack for Plague, make Black Rose blow up, and then normal summon Diva, get Gilman, and then I can stack another card for Plague, attack for everything for game. And I know he doesn't have Gores because it's in the graveyard. So I decide to go for that play because it would be game, right? Also, it plays around Honest as well. So I go for the Black Rose play, and unfortunately for me, it's Threatening Roar. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, you had Colossal Fighter, you just went Colossal Fighter and run over the Honest, run over the Arcus. And if he Honests, then like you don't lose basically a lot of cards. But I didn't lose a lot of cards because I accidentally put this Plague in the banish zone. It's not banished, it's in the graveyard. But let's say I went with that play. If I go attack, then we see a back row roar.
Then he goes Roar, and then next turn he just goes sack for Celestia. So actually this wound up being the better play anyway. So I put Plague back in the grave. I go Soul Release just in case he has like some crazy stuff. I get rid of as many names as I can, and I'm fortunate enough to hit 5 different names, which is really good. So now his graveyard is like really kind of pathetic. So I'm like, this game is in the bag. All right. On his turn, he sets a monster because he knows I have brain control, so he can't summon this Jane because it will likely just be game. I go summon Diva, I get Gilman. So I have a read that he has Raikou set. So then I go, okay. And plus, if he has Raikou set, right? I want to save this Diva because if Gilman gets in for 17, it's not game, right? So I want to save this Diva to pair with like brain control, because I could go like Econ if he summons a monster, put into defense mode, main phase 2, brain control, take attack for game, right? So unfortunately for me, it was a Necro. So I took some damage here. I run this guy over, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just make Catastor. So I make Catastor, and he draws into Raikou for turn, which is really good for him. So I draw into Stratos, which is really good for me because it's perfect, because now I'm able to get some damage in. So I go attack with Catastor, because that way I can keep my Catastor in case it's a Raikou. It is a Raikou. He decides to hit Stratos, which is smart on him, because against Lightsworn, another strategy to keep in mind is bringing your opponent's life points under 1,000 as fast as possible, because then JD doesn't do anything. He's just a 3,000 beat stick. So he hits my Stratos, he mills 3, and luckily for me, although it seems quite bad, luckily for me, he mills a Wolf. And the reason why this is lucky for me is because now I can actually force him to use his Necro Gardener. So in the battle phase, I go Econ and I take his Wolf, right? So now I can attack direct with his Wolf, and he's going to be forced to activate Necro here because he doesn't want to be under 1,000. And then I can clear his Wolf by just making a level 6 Synchro here. Now, what I did accidentally was I accidentally put Diamond Dude on the bottom of the deck instead of the top of the deck. So I just let him know, like, hey, my bad. I put it on the bottom, like I could show you. He knows that I have brain control because I added it with Gold Sark, and he knows that I have Diamond Dude because I added it with Stratos. So after we fixed this, I properly put Diamond Dude to the top of the deck. I made Go You Guardian, and I passed. On his turn, he goes set, T-set, and pass. So I don't want to risk losing to Mirror Force, and I'm like, I'm so comfortable with this situation because if he puts anything face up on the field, he loses. I go you attack, take, mill 2. He sets a back row. I switch it to attack because I'm not worried about Mirror Force now because this card I got for free. He goes Roar, I mill 2, and then he draws Cold Wave for turn, and it's GG's. So definitely a tough matchup. Diva Hero versus Lightsworn is definitely a difficult matchup. As you can see, I did have some spice for it. Like I have Skill Drain with Beast King Barbaros, and also, of course, Defender, because that gives me a 3,000 beat stick and also Defender with 27 defense. It's really, really a good combination, and it'd be hard for Lightsworn to get over. But I didn't need it, right? And even though he drew into double Iron Wall generally is like really good against Diva Hero because I can't banish Mali from Mali. I can't activate Miracle Fusion. I can't activate Dark Arms effect. However, even though he drew it like first turn, it just wasn't as effective as it could have been. But anyway, that's round 3. On to the next, round 4. Hopefully I win an RPS. All right, so round 4, I'm up against Terrell96. And fortunately for me, I do win the RPS. So looking at my hand, the first thing that I think about is what is the most efficient way that I can discard Malicious? And I have 2 different options. I can Rhoda for Greffer, Sark for Rhoda, and then get Greffer. And then with Greffer's effect, pitch Mali out of my hand, send Plague from my deck, make a level 8 such as Stardust, and set 2 back rows, which is really strong. However, as powerful as this play is, it's also very committal. So if anything happens to this Stardust, I'll be in a bit of a bad situation. The second option is just Sarking for D-Draw, which is what I like to do. Now, I know my opponent is on Machina Control because for this event, you have to submit the replays of your previous round. Generally, I don't like setting bottomless turn 1. However, Machina Control is a deck that can put out a lot of power as early as turn 1. As simple as summoning Gear Frame, adding a card, and then special summoning Fortress. So I don't want to be in a spot where I have to take 25 points of damage, and as you can see, my hand is quite weak. Of course, I would have Defender to stall, and then I can tribute it for Malicious the following turn, but taking 2,500 points of damage turn 1
can really set me back. So anyway, I do a T set and my opponent responds with the perfect counter, which is just setting a monster. And this is also why against decks such as Machina Control, Value Turbo, any deck that really plays Raikou, you have to be careful when you set Bottomless. Because if you set it at the wrong time, then on your opponent's next turn, they'll flip up the Raikou, target your Bottomless, and your Bottomless won't get any value. So unfortunately for me, there's not much I can do, so I just decide to pass. And thankfully, on my opponent's turn, he does not flip up his Raikou and instead elects to go for a T set. Now my turn, so 2 turns have gone by, and actually I got the Rhoda. So everything is looking up. Now at this point, I have 2 options. I can Rhoda for Grepher or Stratos first, and of course there are other targets, but those are the 2 main targets. Or I could D-draw first. Now the reason why I want to actually D-draw first is because depending on what I draw, depends on what I'll search. Because although one play, as I explained already, I can Rhoda for the Grepher first, D-draw the Mali, and then I can go pitch to Sudden Plague. It's very committal, right? And I can Rhoda for the Stratos first, but then if I go Destiny draw Malicious and I don't pull into a tuner, I won't have a way to make a level 8. So that's why actually in this scenario, it's better to D-draw first before activating Rhoda. So I D-draw, and fortunately for me, although I didn't draw a tuner, I drew 2 of the most broken cards in the deck, Future Fusion and Caius. Now, I have a read that my opponent has either Raikou or Hamster set, so I can't play Future Fusion just yet. But what I can do is tribute my face down Treeborn for Caius, then roll a die to figure out which card I'm going to target. Now, my opponent responds with Compulsory, which is completely okay for me. It's one of the reasons why I love Caius, because the opponent never wants to be in a situation where they have to compulse a Caius, especially if the opposing player has Treeborn in their graveyard as well. So my Caius attacks his face down. It happens to be another Raikou. Of course, I didn't know that this face down was a Raikou. In the replay, I can see it clearly. My opponent targets the Caius, and he mills 3 cards. So on my turn, as I just explained, I do not activate Future Fusion main phase 2 because I don't have a way to protect it. And if you take a look at this game, my opponent really hasn't been setting any back rows, right? So he set 1 compulsory and he milled this Bottomless off the Raikou. So he hasn't been setting any back rows. So I have a read my opponent has Heavy Storm. And if I go Future Fusion to dump 2 cards and then my opponent responds with a Heavy Storm, I'm going to lose this Bottomless, I'm going to lose this Future Fusion, and those are 2 very powerful cards to lose for nothing. So instead, I just end my turn. Now my opponent sets another monster, and on my turn, I can actually go for the Dark Grepher play that I mentioned before, because now I don't have a choice. If I want to make a level 8 Synchro, then this is the play that I have to make, since I didn't pull into a tuner yet. So I go Rhoda for Grepher, pitch, send Defender, send Plague, banish Mali for Mali, Future Fusion, send Hero and Water, stack a card for Plague. And I did it in this particular order because I don't want to lose the brain control. I really I really value every card in my hand. At this point, I could go Stardust attack the face down. It's a Raikou, so he chooses to just mill, attack direct for 17. I'm not scared of Gores because I have Mirror Force, so attacking here isn't an issue at all. My opponent takes the damage. I set 2 back rows, and I pass to him. Now, at this point in the duel, my opponent is in a very, very difficult spot because I have Stardust behind 3 real back rows, Mirror Force, Bottomless. And this is perfect for the Machina matchup because generally Stardust actually is not quite good against Machina Fortress because their attacks are equal. So my opponent can go summon Machina Fortress, crash into Stardust, and then Machina's Fortress effect destroy a card on the field. But with double Bottomless, that's going to be quite hard to navigate around. Now, unfortunately for me, during this turn, something happens that's not exactly legal. So let me show you what that is. So my opponent summons Gear Frame, and I'm forced to Bottomless. The reason why I have to Bottomless this Gear Frame is because my opponent has Plague Spreader Zombie in the grave. So if I allow this Gear Frame to stay on the field, then what he can actually do is stack a card for Plague and then make Brionic. And as you can see, this field does not defend against a Brionic at all. So I Bottomless the Machina Gear Frame, and he does search out a Machina Force. And this is the part right here where an illegal play happens by my opponent, right? So what he does is, so I bottomless this. He summons a second time. He normal summons a second time. And of course, I didn't catch it. So you might be wondering, a true hero, how did you miss this? It's such an easy thing. Guys, you have to remember that I live in Korea. And you might call this a John, right? John. If you play Smash, you know exactly what a John is. But it's also the truth. Whenever I have tournament sets, I always have to schedule them at the convenience of my opponent. Not my convenience, but the convenience of my opponent. Which means that these sets for me, they literally take place at 6 a.m. in the morning, like right when I wake up. So it's just like my brain isn't at 100%, you know? So yeah, he did this illegal play. It's unfortunate. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. So we just got to continue to roll with the punches. So my opponent's normal summons a second time. I mean, and that's actually quite a big deal because if he wasn't able to normal summon a second time, a lot of things would have changed. Because if you look at the 5 monsters he had in his graveyard previously, it's Triple Raikou, Machina Fortress, and Plague Spreader. And he wants both Machina Fortress and Plague Spreader in his graveyard, right? So now, because we can see he has Pot of Avarice, he doesn't have to return these 2 cards. He can actually just return all 5 of these, which are really great cards to return with Pot of Avarice. So due to my opponent's second normal summon, he's able to get, and he can also run over my Dark Grepher now too, right? So things kind of worked out for him. I do actually have Mirror Force when he enters the battle phase. And the game state, once again, gets construed because now he gets an extra card that he shouldn't have gotten because this should have never been normal summoned. This Pot of Avarice becomes more fruitful. So just a lot of things change. But, you know, that's what happens when the game state becomes misrepresented. So my opponent just sets 3 back rows and pass. Now, I'm in a good spot because I stacked the Brain Control. So this wasn't like a Savage top deck. I specifically stacked it with Plague Spreader Zombie. So I attack direct with 17. He activates Mirror Force, which tells me he doesn't have Deep Prison, which is great. But also at the same time, now when I bring back Stardust, I can't bring Stardust back in attack mode. Because just like I mentioned previously, Machina Fortress, right, which is here in the graveyard, has an attack of 25. And as you can see, I don't have any back rows because I use both of my bottomlesses. So if my opponent summons Machina Fortress, crashes into the Stardust, then he can take out my Future Fusion. And if he takes out Future Fusion and Stardust, I'm going to be in a pickle, as they say. So I actually have to bring back Stardust in defense mode because it's better to lose 1 card than lose 2 cards. My opponent summons Gear Frame, adds Machina Force, brings back Fortress, kills my Stardust, and kills my Grepher. So it's looking like I'm in a bad spot. But surprisingly, I'm actually able to win on my next turn. So what I do here is 0 comes out because it's been 2 turns. And I actually have to look for a ruling. And the ruling that I looked for was whether or not when I unequip Machina Gear Frame, if it comes to my side of the field or my opponent's side of the field. And based off the ruling that I read, it seemed like it comes to my side of the field. But after further investigation, I learned that it does not come to my side of the field, but rather to my opponent's side of the field. So once again, there are 2 things that happened this game that kind of misrepresented the game state. It's unfortunate. 1, due to the second normal summon my opponent did, and 2, due to this play that happens right here. So I Brain Control, activate the effect. But at the same time, I'm going to say this, right, in my defense. 1, these are my opponent's cards, right? My opponent should know how his card interaction works. Like, so he should know that if I declare Gear Frame's effect, that it shouldn't go to my side of the field, but his own side of the field, because they're your cards, right? 2, let's say that this was a Konami ran event, and the judge ruled in my opponent's favor that because I declared Machina Gear Frame's effect, that it has to be summoned to his side of the field in attack mode, right? Because that's what the card says. So even if a judge came and ruled that, this board here is still lethal, right? Because 0 is going to be at 3,000, right? And 3,000 over 18 is 12. So we would take 1,200. 12 and 17 is 29. And then 29 direct and 25 is over 46, right? So whether or not I'm forced to bring the Gear Frame in attack mode or keep it on my side of the field, which is not a legal play, I still have lethal, right? And my opponent's back rows are fake. He has Yada and Starlight Road. And quick side note, this is one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of Yada, because it doesn't really do anything. But anyway, despite the mishaps game 1, I'm able to clutch it out. So with that, we're on to the next game 2. Now game 2, obviously my opponent's going to start first. This hand's quite good against Machina because I have Cyber Dragon, and any hand with Cyber Dragon against a machine-based deck is quite good. But sadly for me, it gets dust shooted out of my hand right away. So now with this kind of hand here, I have a hero and a water, but I don't have any Miracle Fusions. And also, I need to find a way to get the 2 most important cards, not most, but very important cards in my deck out of my deck. So that means I need to start for Future Fusion, because with Future Fusion, I can send Malicious, and I can also send Treeborn Frog. Not to mention, that also opens up a play for level 8. Now, generally, I don't like opening up Double Diva, but with this hand in particular, it's quite good. Reason being is because 1, I can make a Catastor, and then 2, if I set this Defender and then summon a Diva, I can make a level 6 and a level 8. But actually, I just opt to do nothing because, just like I said, setting Bottomless against a set monster is not a good play. I mentioned this game 1 because they'll just flip the Raikou and then you won't get value out of your Bottomless. And I didn't want to set the Defender just yet because there's a potential chance I could pull D-Draw. And if I pull D-Draw after setting the Defender, I would be really not happy. Not to mention, let's just say I set the Defender and I don't draw D-Draw on my turn. Okay, then on my turn, I'm forced to convert it. Because if I don't, then my opponent will draw 2 cards on their following standby phase. And right now, there's no good conversion, right? Yes, you can argue I can make a level 6, but I don't want to make Brionic because I'm going to be returning a monster. And returning monsters are fine if you're going for lethal, or if your opponent has boss monster on the board, like a Synchro monster. But this is just a set monster. There's no point in wasting card advantage on just a set monster. And yes, I can also make a level 8. I can Synchro Climb by making Brio and then turning the Brio into a Stardust with Double Diva. But that's not very good, spending those cards just to make 1 level 8 Synchro. So that's why I just chose to pass. Now my opponent summons Card Trooper. He mills 3. Really good mills for him. He's able to get a Machina Fortress in the grave. And he just attacks direct for 19. So now I draw Stratos, which was honestly the perfect draw here. So I can summon my boy Strizzy, add Prodigy. Prodigy Diva is a really good combination. It gives you access to Black Rose. It gives you access to what I like to call the world's strongest Spine Gilman, where it's just you go special summon Prodigy, normal summon Diva, bring out Spine Gilman, Synchro Armory Arm attack attached to Spine Gilman. So he's a 2700 guy that does burn damage. It's really good. Anyway, so with that, Stratos is actually going to attack into the Card Trooper because I don't want him to mill anymore. Not to mention, this Raikou can't beat over Stratos, right? But Card Trooper can if I allow it to live there. So I run over the Card Trooper, and I still don't set Bottomless because just like I said, this monster hasn't been flipped. So if it's a Raikou, and that was my read, and it was correct, then the Bottomless doesn't get any value. So my opponent charges for another Raikou. He sets a monster, and now 2 turns have passed, so I'm able to get my Future Fusion. So now, things are great. Actually, I can go for the Diva Hero OTK with this hand, because if I go Future Fusion, send Molly, send Treeborn, I can go summon Diva, get Diva, and make a level 6 and a level 8. So I can make Brio Colossal, and then I can pitch the Bottomless out of my hand, the Defender out of my hand, that will return both of his monsters. Play Miracle Fusion, and I don't have to worry about Crow, because I would have 2 waters and 2 heroes, so Crow would be irrelevant, and I can attack with everything for game. Now, the reason why I chose not to do this play actually is because my opponent hasn't been committing back rows to the board. So I actually had to read that he had Gores. Now, granted, with that board, it's a soft out to Gores because Absolute Zero is always a soft out to Gores because if your opponent kills the 0, they lose their Gores. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose so many resources. So I elected to go for a safer play instead of going for game. So I sent Molly and Treeborn with Future Fusion, banish Molly from Molly, summon Diva, get Diva, make a level 6 and a level 8. And I made Stardust and I made Goyu Guardian. So I attacked because, I had to read that this was Raikou, so it didn't do anything. And I was like, okay, this other set monster, did my opponent have double Raikou set? So I decided to take the chance to see if they had double Raikou set. And unfortunately for me, they did, right? Now, I don't want to leave the Raikou there. And the reason why I don't want to leave the Raikou there and why I chose to attack is because if my opponent could potentially have like Caius the Shadow Monarch, right? So if my opponent has Caius, that will put me in a really, really awkward situation. But now that I finally have protection, that means main phase 2, I can finally set my bottomless. So this becomes my end board, and this end board is really strong, but the perfect board breaker at all times is Brain Control Caius. So that's exactly what happens to me. He brain controls my Stardust, and he sacrifices it for Caius, and obviously he's going to target Goyu Guardian. Now, if he was feeling a little risky, one play that he could have did is brain controlled my Goyu Guardian, and then Goyu attack my Stardust, take my Stardust, and then tribute my Goyu Guardian for Caius and target my Raikou, right? But that play, of course, is a little bit committal because, you know, it loses to anything that stops an attack, such as Mirror Force, or even Deep Prison, though I don't play Deep Prison. Now, my opponent goes for this play, banishes my Goyu attacks, puts his Raikou down, and sets 2 back rows. So my opponent went from a very bad situation to a very good situation. Now, I'm the one on the defensive end. So what I decide to do is summon Caius and tell him that he's going to have to eat 3,400 points of damage. And he activates Torrential. So because my opponent activated Torrential there, even though both bottomlesses haven't been checked, this kind of gives me a sign that my opponent does not have bottomless trap hole set. Because why would you not banish, but rather destroy your own Caius with Torrential if you have bottomless? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, yes, you would lose 1,000 points of damage, but at the same time, what card's more valuable, bottomless or Torrential? And the card is clearly Torrential. So in my opinion, the opponent doesn't have a bottomless set or anything to stop a summon. So I go Miracle Fusion and I attack, and thankfully the attack goes through. My opponent summons Lila, it gets bottomless, and at this point my opponent's backs to the wall, so he special summons Cyber Dragon. I draw, and then I just play Brain Control after bringing back Treeborn during the standby, of course. He has the Crow, but that doesn't matter at this point because last turn he didn't have anything to stop an attack. I don't need to put another monster on the board to risk a Torrential, even though Torrential and Mirror Force are both in the grave. But still, the point is that whatever that back row is not real. So I play the Brain Con, and my opponent concedes after I switch Cyber Dragon to attack. So that is round 4. Definitely shout outs to Terrell96. It was a really good set. And just kind of recap, yeah, sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes, you know, even the best players, they miss things, right? Because they're tired or, you know, whatever the case may be. But anyway, with that, on to the next, round 5. Okay, so round 5, I'm up against Magical Mullet. Now, taking a look at my opening hand, it is quite broken. However, it is missing a few key things. 1, a tuner, and 2, back rows to protect any synchro monster that I would make. Now, Future Fusion Tuner is one of the best plays that DivaHero can open, so that's why instead of going turn 1 summoning Stratos, I elect to go set Sangan, play Future Fusion, and then with Future Fusion, I'm going to send both Diva and Malicious. If my opponent destroys my monster by a result of battle, then I can search out another Deep Sea Diva from my deck and go off the following turn. Now, for this event, I know that my opponent is on a variation of frogs, but not just normal frogs, such as Dream Frogs or Hero Frogs, but a teched out version, a cross between both decks actually, because he's playing cards such as Tragodia, Fishboard Blaster, and even Destiny Hero Malicious. Now my opponent attacks into my face down monster, which in my opinion was a bit of a misplay, because now I'm able to search out the missing piece from my hand, which is a tuner, in this case Deep Sea Diva, and my opponent sets 3 back rows and passes his turn. Now, for this event, the replays were compulsory, so although I see 3 back rows before me, I'm not afraid of any of them, because I know one is at least a Regeki break, and the other 2 are likely just not real. And I know for certain that my opponent isn't on Mirror Force, at least main decked. So what I have to do is first bait out the Regeki break. So I summon Diva and I search out another Diva and I banish Mali for Mali. This right here is bait because my opponent is going to target the Malicious because he's going to think that I don't have a follow-up. And that's exactly what happens. He goes Regeki break, he pitches Malicious out of his hand to target my Malicious. And then I'm able to do my next play. Mind Control, take his Stratos. And I have 2 options, right? I can Miracle Fusion his Stratos away, or I can Synchro. But I choose to Synchro because 1, I want to get the Treeborn Frog out of my hand. So when I summon Brio, I go Prio, and I only pitch one. Because once again, I know my opponent isn't on a card like Mirror Force or Torrential. So he chains MST, targets my Future Fusion, but that's completely okay because now my Treeborn becomes live for the following turn. So I'm able to go Miracle Fusion and put on the pressure. Hit him direct for 53 points of damage. Now, had my opponent not dropped Tragodia here, then I would have just ended my turn. But because my opponent dropped Tragodia, at this point I need to make a level 8 Synchro. For this particular situation, the best level 8 Synchro to make is Stardust. Reason being is because if he summons any Monarch, then no matter what Synchro I make, it can either be returned to the extra deck or banished by a Monarch. So extra deck monsters do not fare well against the Monarchs. However, with Stardust, I can do a little bit of tricks. And one of the main tricks that I can do is, let's say he goes summon the Monarch, target my Stardust. I can activate Torrential Tribute and then chain Stardust's effect to negate my own Torrential, putting them in the grave and then bringing them back during the standby phase. Of course, there's always the option my opponent summons a Monarch and targets my 0. But if that's the case, I'm completely okay with it because my opponent would at least lose 2 cards. He would lose the Tragodia that he tributed as well as the Monarch that he summoned. So I decide to make Stardust and set Torrential. My opponent flips up Yada, and this is actually the second time that I can think of that I've seen Yada resolve during this tournament where it did absolutely nothing. And it's one of the reasons why, like, I'm not so much of a big fan of this card. But my opponent decides to just set a monster and pass. I summon Stratos, search out Diamond Dude. My opponent's only at 22, so I'm able to run over the Tragodia, run over the face down monster, and swing for game. So game 1 wasn't too difficult. Now games 2 and 3, when you're up against the Diva Hero versus Frog matchup, it can be a little bit tricky. The game plan for both players is try to establish your floodgate as soon as possible. So the floodgates that Frogs bring out, of course, are Vanity's Fiend. Now Diva Hero also tries to bring out Vanity's Fiend as well, but the difference is Frogs can side into multiple Vanity's Fiends, such as 2 or 3. And it's quite easy for them to summon because they play cards such as Soul Exchange. They also have Prodigy, depending on the version. And more importantly, they have access to Treeborn Frog. Now, in Diva Hero, it's a little bit trickier to bring out Vanity's Fiend because we just have to tribute for it. We don't have all those different ways to summon it. However, the benefit to playing Diva Hero in this matchup is there are a higher variety of floodgates that we can bring in other than just Vanity's Fiend. We can bring in Falsadina, we can bring in Vanity's Fiend, we can bring in Master Strict, we can bring in Soul Release. Like, the list goes on and on and on. Now, my opponent decides to set up his graveyard turn 1 and summon Swamp Frog. And unfortunately for him, from that single play alone, it wound up costing him the match. Now, I'm not saying that it was a misplay. Actually, I agree with what he did. That was the best turn 1 play because he has Gores in his hand. So if I attack direct, he could drop Gores. Not only that, but he also set up his graveyard to summon a Monarch the following turn. But based off my hand, as you can see, if he summoned Kaiko first turn, I would have just lost because I have no out to a Kaiko. But that's hindsight, right? Because my opponent isn't looking at my hand like this. He's just seeing 5 face down, not face down, but the back sleeve Yu-Gi-Oh logo of 5 different cards. He has no idea what I have. So anyway, my opponent does make the optimal play, but it's just unfortunate. Though he made the correct play, it wound up losing him this game and conversely this set. So I summon Falsadina, attack for 12, and that makes the Gores in his hand useless as well as just Treeborn. Set bottomless and I pass. My opponent summons the Kaiko now, and now the Kaiko is able to get bottomless. Once again, as I explained in the previous set, another reason why I don't like bottomless, because let's say my opponent summoned Kaiko turn 1, this bottomless doesn't do anything. So bottomless, I have a love-hate relationship with this card. But anyway, so my opponent gets bottomless, he passes his turn. I draw in a Soul Release, but I don't want a Soul Release on just one Treeborn. Also, I have Falsadina holding it down, so Treeborn's not a threat at this point in time. So I attack direct for 12, and I set Deck Devi. The reason why I set Deck Devi is because I don't want my opponent to think that I don't have anything. So I have to set this at least as a bluff. Now, my opponent, he does a T set, and I draw into a Prodigy. So unfortunately, not the best draw here. So I just don't believe that my opponent drew into a card like Dupe Frog or Substitute, so I just attack, and it worked out in my favor. He had a Fishborg Blaster set. Now, generally, when I have a card like Soul Release, I want to use it on multiple good cards, just as Double Treeborn or multiple Swap Frogs with Double Treeborn and Fishborg Blaster, etc. But in this particular scenario, I had to play Soul Release now. Reason being is because, once again, look at the field. I don't have any way to protect this Falsadina. I don't have another Bottomless. I don't have enemy controller. I don't have Mirror Force. I have absolutely no way to protect this Falsadina. So I just decide to activate Soul Release now, banishing both his Fishborg Blaster and his Treeborn Frog, and pass. And right on time because my opponent pulled into Brain Control. So my opponent activates his MST, hits my deck Devi, which I was a little bit sad about, but it's fine because as you can see, I also don't have any dark monsters. Then my opponent goes Brain Control. So at this point, I already knew what was coming down. Vanity's Fiend, and he attacks the wreck for 24. So my hand does absolutely nothing against a Vanity's Fiend. So what I do for turn after drawing Stratos, one of the best cards I could have drew that turn, you know, he's like a good neighbor, right? He's just like State Farm. Anyway, so I summon Stratos, add the Malicious to my hand, and you know what's next. We de-draw the Mali. And unfortunately, we pull into two monsters, which is not very useful at this point in time. But we have to at least set something, because if we don't set anything, my opponent is going to know that we're weak. So I set Return as a bluff, and I pass. My opponent, once again, takes the bluff and only attacks over the Stratos, so I only take a measly just 600 points of damage. Now, on my turn, I draw on the Plague, and at this point, I have two options. I can either normal summon Diamond Dude and attempt to activate the effect and get lucky, or I can set the Plague. Now, the reason why I don't want to activate Diamond Dude's effect is because one, I might not hit a spell. And if I don't hit a spell, then Diamond Dude just becomes a sitting duck. I take 1,000 for no reason. Plus, my opponent would be more confident in summoning another monster. So that 1,000 could grow into much more life point damage. So what I like to do is just set Plague Spreader instead. Because by setting Plague Spreader, it actually, from his perspective, could look like I set a Snowman Eater. So my opponent runs over the Plague, and for turn, I draw Brain Control. Perfect. So just like my opponent went Brain Control, sack Vanity's Fiend on me, I pull the reversal. So I go Brain Control, attack, and then sack for my own Vanity's Fiend. And my opponent at this point, he is in a sticky situation. So I normal summon Diamond Dude, activate the effect. I don't hit anything, and I just go for game. And I'm able to win the set. So, of course, Magical Mullet, I can understandably understand his situation. He's a bit upset. Peak Yu-Gi-Oh! Floodgate Mon Wars, but I mean, that's the game we live in. That's the game we play. Edison format has floodgates, and so does Modern. And in Modern format, the floodgates are way worse. It's incomparable, night and day. But anyway, with that, on to the next, round 6. Okay, so round 6. I'm up against Yondaime 95. Yondaime and I actually worked closely together before. We were on the same Edison War League team, Perfect Circle, for the most recent Edison War League, where we got second place. Yondaime is one of the most proficient duelists out there, and he's known for playing a variety of different decks, but he's most prominent with Hero Frogs and Black Wings. He's actually come on the channel before, where he shared insight into his plays, where he not only granted us an interview, but also a replay analysis against his set against James Ark. So if you have time, check that out. Get to know Yondaime. Now, with that out the way, we knew that Yondaime for this event was on Hero Frogs, and he opened up one of the most broken openings that his deck could possibly give him. Econ to Stratos, add Malicious, then 1-for-1 the Malicious he just added to end his board on not only a dupe lock, but this dupe lock allowed him to return his Stratos via Swamp Frog's effect and set a back row. So he is in a very, very strong position turn 1. Now I activate MST on his back row and I hit a Wing Blast, which is perfect because now he can't get additional value out of the Wing Blast. It's just a 1-for-1. I summon Diva, get Spine Gilman, and I set both Bottomless Trap Hole and Deck Devastation Virus. During his standby phase, I chain DDV. And it's important that I chain it to Treeborn's effect because it'll make the dupe frogs miss timing. For those of you who are wondering what allows a card to miss timing, it's simple. When a card or effect is destroyed at chain link 2 or higher, in this case dupe frog, then it'll miss timing. Chain link 1, deactivation of Treeborn Frog's effect. Chain link 2, the destruction of the monsters via deck devastation virus. So this allows for all of his monsters to be destroyed. Now it is the standby phase, so that means his Treeborn Frog will come back. And now I have full knowledge of what cards my opponent has in his hand. So he summons Stratos, and at this point I have to think, is it worth activating Bottomless Trap Hole here or not? And ultimately I decide not to. Now it's a bit tricky because one, as you can see, I do not have any out to a Monarch if he were to summon one, which is why I need to save the back row for a Monarch. But at the same time, we can also see that he has Regeki Break in his hand. So if I don't bottomless this Stratos now, then Yondaime can set Regeki Break on his end phase, and then on my turn or any turn before he summons again, he can activate Regeki Break, targeting my bottomless, and then I didn't get any value out of it, right? So actually, it's quite a difficult decision to activate or to not activate bottomless at this point. But I decide to hold on to my bottomless and allow the Stratos attack to go through. So I take 1800. Now, I draw into Allure of Darkness, which is great because I can rotor from my own Stratos to crash out with his Stratos, and also with Stratos effect, I add Prodigy and activate the Allure. So I lure the Prodigy, I draw into BrainCon and Plague Spreader, which is really good. Crash out into the Stratos as planned, and I have my turn. And this is exactly what I was saying, right? So now Yondaime has the option to activate Regeki Break on my back row. But he elects not to do that and instead summons Ryza. So I'm able to activate Bottomless and I got great value out of it, 1 for 1. And on my turn, I draw into Caius. So as you can see, I set Plague Spreader Zombie. Now, of course, I did not want to set Plague Spreader Zombie, but my line of thinking was this. Plague Spreader and Caius combo together, Brain Control and Diva combo together. If I set my Plague, my opponent doesn't know that it's Plague. He could have a read that it's Sangan or even a card such as Snowman Eater. So there's a chance if I set Plague, he doesn't attack it. Then on my following turn, I have two options. I can either 1, tribute the Plague for Caius, or 2, I could potentially draw into another monster in synchro with my set Plague. So it all depends on how things play out. But on Yondaime's draw phase, he does draw into a Swamp Frog, which gets hits by DDV, which is great for me. But he decides to take the risk, he summons Ocean and crashes out and kills the Plague. Now I draw into Return, which is one of the best draws at this point, because now, since I know my opponent has Regeki Break, the goal of this turn is to bait out the Regeki Break. Now there are two ways to do it. I can stack a card for Plague and stack for Caius, but the problem with that is, let's say that I stack for Plague and then he activates Regeki Break, I'm going to be so far behind because I would have to stack the Return, and then if he breaks my Plague in my hand, I only have Brain Control and Diva, right? So I would have to play both cards in order to outjust an Ocean. It's too much. So that means the only play that I can do without negging myself through Plague's effect is summoning Diva and activating Brain Control. So I summon Diva to get Diva, activate Brain Control, and take his Ocean. So at this point, since I know he has Regeki Break, it doesn't make sense to make a level 6 synchro. So I attack direct with both, and he activates Regeki Break. And that worked out perfectly for me because this is a -3 for him. He lost both of his Regeki Breaks and his own Ocean. And the reason why this is so good for me is because I know that he has Caius in his hand because, once again, he's under Deck Devastation Virus. So during my main phase 2, I can set Return from a different dimension. It is very unlikely that during his standby phase, when he brings back Treeborn, and then during his main phase, when he summons Caius, that he'll hit the back row because it could be a chainable card such as Bottomless Trap Hole, just as what happened before. Generally, when Monarch players summon their Monarchs, they target the monsters. So let's say Yondaime goes bring back Treeborn, summon Caius, hit a Diva, run over the other Diva. On my following turn, I can activate Return from a Different Dimension and bring back both the Diva that was banished and Prodigy. And as you can see, I have Caius in my hand, right? So that means that I contribute the Prodigy for Caius, burn his Caius, hit him for 34, 1,000 from the effect damage, 24 from Caius, plus an additional 200 from Diva. Synchro into a level 8 such as Thought Ruler, and I'm in a strong position. Another option that could also change things would be the card that I draw for turn. So if I draw Miracle Fusion for turn, then I just pretty much just win, because then before I do any of that, I can even banish the Stratos and the Deep Sea Diva in the grave. However, things unfortunately did not go as planned because my opponent for turn drew the best card, which was his Miracle Fusion. Now, because he drew his Miracle Fusion, what he needs to do is to ensure that this Absolute Zero gets summoned successfully. So the best way to ensure that it gets summoned successfully is actually by targeting the back row and not by targeting the monster. So he brings back Treeborn, tributes it for Caius, hits my back row, and that's when I knew the game was over. He brings out his own Zero. His Zero runs over my Diva. I take a lot of damage because Zero's at 35. He kills my other Diva, and I only have a Caius in my hand. Now I draw into Creature Swamp, so this card does absolutely nothing in this scenario. Of course, I stack a card for Plague, and yes, I can activate Creature Swamp, but what's going to happen? I'll give him my Plague, he'll give me his Caius, he's not going to give me a Zero. I can run over the Plague, he'll take 2,000, and on his turn, he's just going to kill the Caius with the Zero he has on board. So I mean, actually, Creature Swamp, this is a card that I want to talk about. I tested this card out for this particular event, and I was very disappointed in its performance because of situations like these. Creature Swamp often was not as good as I wanted it to be. The reason why I tested it out is because, in theory, it's really good. Because I can Creature Swamp with Treeborn, I can Creature Swamp with the other mini monsters that Diva Hero has, such as the Divas, the Spine Gilmans. Of course, you don't generally want to give your opponent a tuner, but if you give them a tuner in attack mode like Diva and then you run it over, that's a lot of damage, right? Plus, Diva can get another Diva, so you can synchro with their monster as well. So it opens up a lot of different combo possibilities. The best interaction that I had with Creature Swamp throughout this entire event was at one point, I went Mind Control to take one of their monsters, and I went Creature Swamp, and then I gave them back their monster and permanently took their other monster, right? So that was like kind of like the best interaction that I had with Creature Swamp. But other than that, it didn't perform very well. But getting back to this game, unfortunately, that was just the end, so I had to concede. So going on to game 2. Now, game 2, as you can see, I did not open up very well. So I set Treeborn, set Torrential, and I pass. Yandaime goes for the standard play. Summon Substitute, Attribute, can Swamp Frog. Swamp Frog send Treeborn, and Treeborn run over my face down monster, which is my Treeborn, right? His Swamp Frog run over my Treeborn. I draw into another Speller Trap, so it doesn't really do anything. So I don't want to commit more to the board because obviously that plays in a heavy storm, so I just pass. Yandaime brings back his Treeborn and he sacks for Caius. Activate Torrential, so that's a pretty good 1-for-1. He sets a back row and he passes. Now I drew into Future Fusion, which is actually really good because as you can see, Future Fusion and Miracle Fusion is an amazing combination. But I don't play my Future Fusion. The reason why I don't play it is because you have to think about the back rows that Frog players typically have. Generally, the cards that they set are like MST, Regeki Break, or Wing Blast, something along these lines. So if I go Future Fusion here and he goes Regeki Break, then like, look, I can't win this game at all because I need to get access to Heroes and Waters as soon as possible. So because there's nothing I can do, I just pass. Now, on Yandaime's turn during his standby phase, he elects not to bring back Treeborn because he has this back row. So that tells me that this is something that is a responsive trap, right? So he's waiting for me to do something before he can activate it. Now on his turn, what he does instead is he just passes. So I bring back my Treeborn and I think about what to do. This hand is really good and I don't want to just allure my Gores away because Gores is a win condition, especially with cards like Econ, Future Fusion, and Miracle Fusion backing it up. Not to mention I have Deck Devi, right? So I want to be able to Deck Devi my own Gores. So I think about what to do, and I decide that I need to set bait. So the bait here that I'm going to set, unfortunately, is going to be Enemy Controller. Because by setting Enemy Controller, if he, like, end phase gets rid of the back row, then the rest of my hand becomes live. So I set econ, and my read was right. It was Regeki break. He breaks my econ. On his turn, he brings out Caius. Looking at his hand now, of course, I didn't know what he had. I do think it would have been wise of him to bring out Vanity's Fiend at this point instead of Caius, right? But he brings out his own Caius, and now he doesn't attack. He does not attack, right? Once again, Yondaime is not like the average duelist. So he had a read that I had Gores, and that was a great read because, as you can see, I did have Gores in my hand. And at this point, I am forced to activate the Future Fusion. I can't wait any longer. I've already did my best to bait out his responsive Speller Trap, and it worked. So if he drew into another one, it is what it is. So I activate Future Fusion, and he gives me the thumbs up, which is perfect because now I can go off. So I send Diva, I send Malicious, banish Mali from Mali, summon Diva, and I don't activate the effect. Reason being is because I kind of had a read that my opponent had pulling the rug set, and I didn't want to get rugged. So, and this is also one of the reasons why I think pulling the rug is not as effective against Diva Hero as people believe it to be, because you can simply summon Diva and not activate her effect. Anyway, so at this point, it baits out Yondaime's Torrential, and now I can finally afford to go off. So I activate Miracle Fusion, banish, bring back my own 0, and attack direct for 25. Yondaime takes it, I pass. He brings back Treeborn during the standby phase, tributes for a set monster, and activates Miracle Fusion, which is really smart because this plays around DD Crow. That's why he did it in this way, right? Actually, now that I think about it, he didn't even need to set, because this is malicious, he didn't even need to set the monster, because even if he normal summoned it, it would have played around Crow, because I can't Crow a monster that's on the field. But anyway, Yondaime chose to do it this way, and despite the way he did it, the result is the same. He's able to bring out his own Absolute Zero. So he brings out his own Absolute Zero. He thinks about crashing out, but he doesn't. Guys, one thing you should know is that when two zeros are opposing each other, the person who attacks with their 0 first typically loses the exchange. And what I mean by loses the exchange is this. Yes, both zeros will die. All monsters on the field will die. But the reason why the attacker loses the exchange is because after that battle phase is done, if you can't summon another monster, on your opponent's turn, they can summon a monster and attack you directly. So that's why whoever attacks with 0 first typically loses the exchange. Now look at my hand, and I'm fine with losing the exchange. Main phase 2, I wrote it for Stratos, and with Stratos, I'm able to add Prodigy, and I can allure the Prodigy away. But I actually decided to keep the Prodigy because Grepher's purpose is actually sending cards like Malicious. And if I look at my banish zone, both Maliciouses are already gone. So there's no point in holding on to Grepher. Grepher has already served this purpose, right? Now, of course, you can make the argument that I could have kept the Grepher to like pitch, and send Plague, but doing committal plays with Grepher is not good unless you have a card like Return from a Different Dimension. And in this case, I don't have it. Plus, I have Sangam, which can also search out Plague Spreader as well. So main phase 2, after doing that, I just pass. Yondaime summons Swamp Frog, sends another Swamp Frog, activates Miracle Fusion, attacks. So, I mean, I take a bit of damage here, but it's not anything to be worried about. On my turn, I draw into Gold Sark. During the standby phase, I bring out my 0. So he actually activates MST, tells me to wait. Not a big issue. So instead, I Sarko for Miracle Fusion because that's what I need at this point in time. And I set Sangan and set Mirror Force. Now, my opponent, of course, doesn't have a read that I have Mirror Force because he summons his own Swamp Frog. He summons his Swamp Frog, thins out the deck, and activate Mirror Force. And that's a great exchange for me because now I'm able to search out Deep Sea Diva with the Sangan, and my opponent passes. And I draw into my Miracle Fusion. So you know what that means? Time to put on the pressure. Now, one play that I would love to do is, of course, immediately like summon Catastor, right? But I don't do that despite the fact that I have Deck Devastation Virus. And it's funny because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a domino effect. Earlier when I summoned Diva, I did not activate the effect because I read he had Pulling the Rug. If I had summoned Diva and activated the effect, even though he didn't have Rug, if I would have brought out Spine Gilman, then this deck Devi would be dead. So anyway, I normal summon Diva, bring Spine Gilman, activate Miracle Fusion, and I go Diva attack direct for 17, and attack direct for 3,000. And that brings him down to a 35, and that brings him down to 300. So actually, looking at this game state, that was a slight misplay by me, because what I should have did is actually special summon Prodigy first. If I special summon Prodigy first, normal summon Diva, get Spine Gilman, and then play Miracle Fusion to bring back 0, then the Prodigy can beat over the Treeborn, and I could attack direct with everything, and that would have been game, right? However, one of the reasons why I didn't do that was because simply I didn't do math, you know? And that's one of the important parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is you have to thoroughly think out your turns. Not to mention, I'm in such a strong position right now that it's going to be very difficult for him to come back. So main phase 2, we make Catastor, we set deck Devi, he brings back his Treeborn, he summons Substitute, he attempts to set up a soft lock. This isn't like the Substitute lock, but I mean, of course, I have to attack over the dupe frog. He brings back out his Unifrog to bait out the back row, and during the battle phase, I just chain deck Devastation Virus, and he concedes. So that brings us down to the last game. Now, game 3, as you can see, I opened up terrible, to say the least. This hand is not very good. It would be fine if I had a Miracle Fusion, but I don't. But unbeknown to me, actually, Yandame also opened up quite terrible as well. From my perspective, he opened up well because he has Stratos, right? But if you look at his hand, right, which we can see in the replay, he doesn't have any water monsters, and he has Miracle Fusion. So he goes Rhoda, or E-Call rather, for Stratos at the Malicious, and then he shows me the Malicious. I DC'd, and he sets it back when he passes. So I go Special Summon Prodigy, and of course, I'm going to go for the Caius play. What I would like to go for, if I pulled a card like Heavier MST, what I would have liked to go for would have been like Summon Diva, get Diva, make Army Arm, make Goyu attack the Stratos, and then search out my Stratos. But like I said, against this deck, typically the cards that they're going to have are cards like Wing Blast or Regeki Break, right? And in this case, we can even see that it was Wing Blast. And generally, players don't like to Wing Blast a Caius because it can come back to hurt them later on in the duel. So he does Wing Blast Caius here, which I'm completely okay with. And the reason why he does it is because he has Vanity's Fiend, and he knows it'll be quite difficult for me to beat over the Vanity's Fiend. So he Wing Blasts. This is my Caius, attacks direct for 24. I redraw my Caius, and here I have two options. I can either beat over the Vanity's Fiend with Diamond Dude and Econ, or I can set Defender. Now, let's look at the game state, right? At this point, he hasn't summoned any Monarchs. Vanity's Fiend is kind of like a soft Monarch. So if I set Defender, and he goes Tribute Vanity's Fiend for Caius, then I'm in a really, really, really tight spot, right? So at this point, I was worried about losing to a Caius, but what I should have did is set Defender, because even if he does do that, let's say that he does do that, right? I take 34. 34 isn't 56. Not to mention, we know he can't special summon because he has Vanities up, and 2, he doesn't even have access to any water monsters. So what I should have did here is just set Defender, and on my turn, sacrifice Defender for Caius. Lastly, if you look at my hand, I don't have any protection. I don't have any back rows with the exception of Econ. So if I go for Diamond Dude effect and then like run over the Vanity's Fiend with like Econ, it's not good because then I lose my only back row that I drew. But hindsight is 2020. We Diamond Dude's effect, we hit Bottomless, we attack, we Econ and Battle Step, we kill over the Vanity's Fiend. He wrote us for Ocean, and here I draw in the Stratos. So once again, this is another opportunity for me to set Defender. But setting Defender here is more risky because 1, now my opponent has the option to special summon, okay? Because he doesn't have Vanities up on the field. And 2, if I set Defender, then he can activate Ocean's effect. Now, how relevant will it be adding a Malicious to this hand? It depends, right? It depends. Like, he could draw into like 1-for-1, but still, generally, you don't want to keep Ocean on the field so that it can activate and resolve its effect. So I pulled into Stratos, which is great. So I decided to run over his Ocean, and that wound up being my undoing. I run over Stratos, he takes 300, and he draws into Brain Control. And that was the perfect card to seal this set. So he thinks for a while, he summons Zero, he summons the alias that he added, Brain Controls, attack with everything, and that's the set. So, I mean, definitely well played by Yandaime. I definitely think that game 3, things would have went differently if I set Defender, because also by setting Defender, there's a chance that he would have summoned Ocean as additional kind of like support with his Vanity's Fiend. And what I could have done is like sacrifice the Defender for Caius, and then Caius target the Ocean if he summoned it. But we don't know, right? Woulda, coulda, shouldas, because he also could have summoned Alias. But the main point is I should have set Defender to defend my life points, and I didn't. Anyway, with that, that's my first loss that I take, round 6. On to the next, round 7. Okay, so round 7, I'm up against Sheldon99, playing against Black Wings for the second or third time this event. Now, my opponent, thankfully, does not open up Whirlwind Shora. Now, as you can see, I have Heavy Storm, but I chose not to play it. The reason why is because Heavy Storm is such a powerful card that you typically want to save it for when you're about to go for an OTK or an important push. And with the hand that I currently have, I can't do either. So what I decide to do is just set MST. Now, I don't really like setting MST when I have Heavy Storm, but I have to set something. And the reason why I don't want to set Bottomless is because I can go for the MST Gores play. MST, target one of his back rows, drop Gores, and then follow up with a Heavy Storm. So, not to mention, MST, my opponent has no idea what card that is. They can read it as a Bottomless, they can read it as a Torrential, so they're not going to put much pressure on the board. Now, likely, my opponent has an Icarus attack set, but if I'm lucky off the 50-50, then I can hit the Icarus attack with the MST. So I set MST and I pass. He flips up Yada, which is great because that makes the choice a lot easier. He activates Allure, banishes Sirocco, attacks. I flip MST. He didn't even have Icarus attack. It was just a Dust Tornado. Drop Gores in a token. So now I'm in a good spot. And my opponent decides to make Black Rose, which I'm completely okay with. So my opponent doesn't have any back rows. So if he summons Shora, then this is screaming that he has Quilute in his hand. So I go, summon Diva, get Spine Gilman, activate Brain Control on his Shora, Synchro and Goyu Guardian, attack with both, set Bottomless, and tell you to deal. Because if he summons anything that has attack of 1500 over, I Bottomless the monster, I play Heavy Storm, and that's the game. But my opponent summons Blizzard, and he targets Shora. So at this point, I have a choice. I can activate Bottomless Trap Hole, not targeting because Bottomless doesn't targeting, but destroying the Shora that was summoned. Now, if I do this and my opponent doesn't have a follow-up, he loses on the spot, right? The problem is let's say I activate Bottomless and he has a Bora in his hand. He can special summon Bora and then pitch to return my Goyu Guardian, run over my Spine Gilman, and I lose on the spot because I don't have an out to Brionic. So even though I know he's going to make Brionic with this field, I would rather him pitch his own cards and me Bottomless his Brio, then take the chance of me Bottomless his Shora, and then he's special summoning Bora out of his hand. So that's exactly what happens. He synchros into Brio, he pitches, I Bottomless, he sets a back row, and I draw into Sangan, which is perfect because this is actually lethal. Heavy Storm on the back row, summon Greffer, pitch Sangan for Mali, banish Mali for Mali, attack with all 3, and that's game. So moving on to game 2. Now, game 2, I open up Consecrated Light, which is obviously really good against Black Wings. And he opens up the exact same opening that he did game 1. Bora with 2 set. So this hand, unfortunately, can't really do much. So I activate Gold Sark first, just in case he has Icarus attack. And I Sark for Heavy Storm. The reason why I had to activate it first is because let's say that I summon Consecrated and then activate Gold Sark. Well, I have 2 cards on the field, Consecrated, and Gold Sark. So my opponent could go Chain Icarus, and then I'm in a tight spot, right? So I activate Gold Sark first, banishing Heavy Storm, and I summon Consecrated, and I just hope that it can ride out. Now I draw for turn. I draw into a card that doesn't really matter because the optimal play here is actually playing into Icarus Attack. And why is it playing into Icarus Attack? Because by setting the Sangan, if he goes end phase Icarus, I can search out Deep Sea Diva. And as you know, I'm going to get Heavy Storm next turn. So Diva with Brain Control and Heavy Storm, he's going to lose so many of his cards if he activates Icarus Attack. So at this point, I don't mind setting Sangan to the field. So I set Sangan, and on his turn, he still doesn't do anything. Now I draw into Dark Arm, which makes things even better. So at this point, I'm like, oh, this game is over. So I just decide to set Defender. Because if I set Defender, that's just another Dark in the Grave to summon Dark Arm. So I set Defender, I end, and he finally activates the Icarus that he's been holding. He hits Consecrated and Sangan. So of course, at this point, I have an option, right? I can search out Diva or I can search out Plague. But I choose to search out Plague because that would be 3 darks, right? Sangan, Defender, and Plague. And it's very unlikely that he can summon a monster to beat over 27 defense. And even if he does, I have Brain Control. So at this point, I pretty much have game. He summons Blizzard, brings back Bora, makes Arm Wing. He does beat over my Defender. I take 100, and I draw Rhoda for turn. So I'm like, well, I hope you have something. If not, this is going to be game. Because I could go Heavy Storm, activate Rhoda for Greffer, Greffer pitch Plague, send Molly, stack a card, likely the MST, banish, make a level 8, Colossal Fighter, drop Dark Arm, Brain Control, game. So I have game. This hand is actually just game. But my plans were thwarted by one card, Trap Dust Shoot. So he Trap Dust Shoot it and he sent back my Plague. So now I can't do any of that. So I'm just forced to set Snowman Eater and pass along with MST because I don't want him to go Rowan Shora. So Snowman Eater takes out the Arm Wing. He passes. I draw on the Caius. So we are going to go Rhoda Stratos, add Prodigy, obviously. Swing Direct for 18. So I'm in a good position, despite the fact that Trap Dash Shoot saved him. He draws Heavy Storm for turn. He heavies me. It's not a big deal. Takes out MST. So now his Whirlwind can kind of like ride out. But he doesn't have much of a strong follow-up, right? Whirlwind Gale. Adds Vayu, halves, attacks, run over. Not a big deal. He sets a back row. And for my turn, I draw Royal Decree. Perfect. Because at this point, I have 2 darks. And I can easily get 3. Special Summon Prodigy, sack for Caius, and that's 3 darks. He'll take 1,000 from Caius, drop Dark Arm, game. So once again, I'm at my second point where it's just like, I have a game against Black Wings. So I set Decree and I pass. He summons Vayu, attacks for both. I take 21. I'm not worried about this at all. During the end phase, he sets a back row and I activate Royal Decree. So I'm like, all right, the game's over. But fortunately for him, he had Icarus Attack. So he's forced actually to take out one of his own cards because I only had Decree on the field. So he takes out his Whirlwind, which is quite good for me. And now I think, right, at this point, I'm like, all right, I can still go for game. This is my 3rd shot at game. I can go Special Summon Prodigy, sack for Caius, target the back row. And as long as that back row is not Bottomless Trap Hole, then it's game. Because Caius will remove the back row. I can Brain Control his Gale, drop Dark Arm. So I go Special Summon Prodigy, sack for Caius, target the back row, and of course, it's Bottomless. And I'm just like, all right, I can't catch a break. I had 3 game shots, and he managed to avoid all 3. So I just dropped Dark Arm Raw at this point, banish Sangan, attack for 28, set Torrential just in case anything goes wrong. He goes banish to bring out Arm Wing. Now he has 3 darks in the grave. So you know what boy is coming out. Daddy's home. Prio, target my Dark Arm, Torrential, clear the board. Okay. He sets 2 and he passes. I draw into Caius, which doesn't do anything, but Brain Control Caius is an amazing combo. I draw into Mirror Force, set it as protection. Draw into Miracle Fusion, dead. So we're just both drawing dead, passing back and forth to each other. So this goes on for a while until he pulls Whirlwind Shora. Now he goes Whirlwind Shora, and I think actually he should have added Blizzard, but but instead he adds Bora for some reason, right? So he adds Bora and he special summons it. He attacks and I just go Mirror Force. And I draw into Diva. So slowly but surely, my hand is becoming more and more broken. The problem is that he could potentially have the second Royal Oppression. There's a lot of cards he could have, right? But I just decide that, you know what? Heavy Storm's gone. Royal Decree is gone. MST is gone. I don't really have many ways to play around his back rows anymore. So I summon Diva, activate the effect, and thankfully, I don't get Royal Oppression, but unfortunately I get Pulling the Rug. So I believe this is the third time this video where I have brought up Pulling the Rug versus Diva Hero. So I want you guys all watching at home to pay close attention to this video. So he managed to successfully pull off Pulling the Rug against my Deep Sea Diva. I activate Miracle Fusion, and I attack, and the attack goes through. Now, because this attack goes through, this kind of actually suggests to me that he has another Pulling the Rug set. However, I look at his life points total and I decide to weigh the odds. If he has Pulling the Rug set, then sure, he stops Game Shot for the 4th or 5th time. But if he doesn't have Pulling the Rug set, I win. So I go for it. So I sack 0 for Caius, and of course, he has Pulling the Rug. So guys watching at home, he has successfully resolved 2 Pulling the Rugs at 2 critical moments, okay? Now, the reason why I was okay making that play is because if he commits any monster to the board, I have brain control. So that's why going for that play was worth it. Now, my opponent draws dead, and we continue to draw and pass. I do draw the Decree, which is kind of comical, but then he has Dust Tornado, so I don't feel as bad when he gets Dust Tornadoed. And that's all of my Spell and Trap destruction, right? Both Decrees, Heavy, MST, and even Stratos. So I'm not clearing any more back rows for the rest of this game. My opponent draws into a back row, sets it. I draw into Miracle Fusion, which is great. At this point, I was praying for like literally any monster that can just do 900 points of damage. I got 0, which is great because obviously 0 is live, but I didn't want to play it because 0 could potentially fall to like a Bottomless, a Deep Prison, but it's just like I don't want to extend this game because my opponent has Whirlwind on the field. So I'll just go for it. Banish, summon 0, attack, unfortunately, Deep Prison. Now here, my opponent draws in a Blizzard, which is the card I said he should have searched off a shore a while ago. And he makes Armwing, attacks the wreck for 23, and he even colludes me to make the brain control in my hand dead. So really, really heads up play by him. But I'm not even tripping because I have enemy controller. So if I like literally pull any monster, then like I win. I'll just econ, tribute the monster, take his Armwing, attack, kill him for game. And my deck like kind of laughed at me. It's like, oh, you want any monster? We'll give you any monster. And it gave me Malicious. So obviously I have to activate Lightning Vortex here because if I don't activate Lightning Vortex, I lose. I'm at 800, right? I could set the econ, but I still want to save the econ because it's a win condition. And unfortunately for me, Malicious has an attack of 800. So it's like, even if I go banish Molly for Molly and attack, it's only going to, put him at 100. So I set both back rows and I pass. He goes, sets a back row, he passes. And I draw into my 3rd Miracle Fusion. I'm just like, well, at some point, you're going to run out of real back rows. At some point. Like, they can't all be real, right? They can't all be real. So I activate Miracle Fusion, banish for 0, attack. The attack goes through, and that's the game, Really, really difficult set. But I just want to bring this back to Pulling the Rug, He resolved 2 Pulling the Rugs, and we see where it got him. And this is no jab to Sheldon, not at all. Sheldon played a great game. But this is a jab to all of those people who said, oh, a true hero is trying to get people to stop playing Pulling the Rug so that Diva Hero could be successful. No, because once again, I was only talking in the context of versus frogs, that Mask Strict is better. If you guys want to play Pulling the Rug and think that it's going to get you victories against Diva Hero, be my guest. All right, we could sing Beauty and the Beast together. Anyway, with that said, on to the next round 8, 9. On to the next round. Okay, so round 8, the final round of Swiss for this event. Now, in terms of topping, this round doesn't really matter because currently both of our records are 6-1, which means if we lose this event, we'll be one of the highest X2s And considering that this event is top 16, we're guaranteed to make it. Now, as you can see, I'm up against AJTDad, or as he's more commonly known, AJTBLS. For those of you who don't know who he is, he's one of the most proficient GOAT players, right up there with Anthony Alvarado, who was actually my teammate for the YCS Vegas 3v3 GOAT Edison Tengu event. And as luck may have it, AJT was actually Frazier's GOAT teammate for that particular event. Anyway, with that said, for Edison format, AJT has been known to play Blackwings. So it's my third time up against Blackwings for this event. He activates a lure, banishes his Bora, sets 2 and passes. He activates Dust Shoot, sending back my only monster, which means that I have to Gold Sark for Rhoda. Not to mention I have D-Draw in my hand, and Rhoda and D-Draw pair well together. So I pass, and now my opponent sets 3 back rows and passes. Now, this is very important because I have to look at the order in which he set his cards. Let's refer to each of the set cards by their zones. Zone 1 being the one closest to the main deck, Zone 5 being the one closest to the extra deck. The card in Zone 2 was already previously there, but the newly set cards were the cards in Zones 1, 3, and 4. So that means that the Starlight Road or Solemn Judgment is in one of those 3 zones. It's not going to be in Zone 2, or else he would have set all of his back rows to turns prior. So this becomes relevant later on. Now, for my turn, I draw and I pass. His turn, he sets a back row into Zone 5, and now 2 turns have finally passed, so I get my Rhoda. Rhoda for Stratos, Stratos effect, add Malicious, D-Draw the Mali, and I pull into another Gold Sark, and I attack first. Now, the reason why I attack first before activating Gold Sark is because the card that I need to win this game is Heavy Storm. If I activate Gold Sark for Heavy first before attacking, if he has a D Prison, he's going to be inclined to use it because he knows a Heavy Storm is coming. Now, I set 2 back rows because I have a read that one of those 5 back rows is actually going to be an MST, and it was. Now, it's very important. The MST came out of Zone 4. So now we know that the Starlight Road or Solemn is no longer in Zone 4 because he activated a card from that zone. It has to be either Zones 1 or Zones 3. So during the end phase, he MSTs and hits my Torrential. He sets a back row, a new back row into Zone 4. I attack with Stratos. So at this point, I'm completely fine with the pace of the game because I'm just doing Stratos beatdown. I pass. He sets a back row and he activates Icarus Attack, targeting my Stratos and my set card. So at this point, once again, I know the Starlight Road or Solemn is in Zones 1 or 3. So I activate MST and I roll a die. And the way I decide is 1 to 3 will be the left one, 4 to 6 will be the right one. I usually do evens odds, but for this particular decision, I did 1 to 3 and 4 to 6. So I rolled the die and I got a 6. So that meant that I'm going to target this middle one. And lo and behold, it was Solemn Judgment. So now on my turn, I add my Heavy Storm and activate Heavy Storm. And upon activating Heavy Storm, AJT immediately concedes. Now, one thing that I want to bring up, if you're curious on an in-depth explanation on how to read cards like Solemn Judgment or Starlight Road, actually I have an exclusive Patreon video which explains in detail how to read when you're up against this type of scenario. Guys, if you're really interested in improving your gameplay, I highly recommend subscribing to my Patreon. At the Elemental Hero Stratos tier, you get access to a ton of videos that'll help improve your gameplay. Anyway, with the shameless self-promoting out the way, let's get back into the duel once again. So as you can see, my hand is quite weak, and my opponent opens up Rowan Shura. So at this point, when I see Rowan Shura and I see like how weak my hand is, I'm not even going to be upset if I lose this game. So he opens up Rowan Shura, summons Armor Master, So clearly I know what's going to happen. He's going to activate Deck Devi. And immediately he Deck Devis. So I'm forced to Heavy Storm, and thankfully I only lose Spine Gilman, which isn't too much of a big deal. Plus I have Miracle Fusion in my hand. So I'm forced to activate Heavy Storm here because I can't keep the Whirlwind up. And I set both Bottomless and Decree. And my opponent pulls one of the best cards he can off the top, which is Falsodina. Because granted, if he pulled like a Blackwing, specifically like Bora or Shura, I could just Bottomless. And even if he pulled a card like Quilute, if I pull into a hero, it'll get destroyed by Deck Devi and I can just Miracle Fusion afterwards. So Falsodina off the top here was one of the best top decks that he could have asked for. So anyway, he attacks with Dyna, I take 12. I pull in a Snowman Eater, which is crazy, right? Because I just mentioned that if he didn't get Dyna off the top, that things would be much better, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh! It is what it is. He swings direct for 12 again. I draw. Deck Devi just going absolutely insane. So Deck Devi was able to take out my past 2 draw phases. So on his turn, he draws into Shura. 3 turns went by. I bottoms to Shura finally. I take another 12. I pull in the return. So at this point, like I said, there's no point in being upset over this game because it was unwinnable, right? And he just goes for the game. He sacrifices, he gets 3 darks, he drops Dark Arm, and that's just the game. So game 1 for him was very quick. Game 2 for me was very quick. Now looking at my opening hand, once again, opening up Spine Gilman. He loves chilling there. I wish I drew Dark Arm Dragon as much as I drew Spine Gilman, but, you know, Yugs. So I set Sangan, and even though I don't particularly like setting monsters against Blackwings because they can open up like Shura or like Sirocco or like Whirlwind, and things can get out of hand. This is game 3. So he can have a potential read that this set monster is a Snowman Eater. But anyway, so as we can see, he did have Shura in his hand, and he sets 2 and he passes. So he Deck Devis me immediately, which is fine. It's actually not a big deal because I can search out Consecrated Light with Deck Devi. And although I didn't have knowledge of his hand, we can see in the replay, he has all dark monsters. And I have Heavy Storm. So I'm going to Heavy Storm, clear this back row, and summon Consecrated Light. And I am in a very good position. I have Brain Control, I have Stratos, I have everything that I need. So this Deck Devi is not really going to be hurting me as much as it did the previous game. But with this AJT get off the top, another Falsodina. It's crazy. And although Falsodina isn't as impactful here because he's not really hurting me in the sense of me not being able to special summon, he's benefiting AJT in the sense that now he can summon his monsters. Because if he didn't pull this Falsodina, then this Stratos would have just went ham. But anyway, he attacks over the Consecrated Light. I take 12. I draw Kai's for turn. So obviously summon Stratos, add Defender. I would add Prodigy, but the Prodigy is already in the graveyard. And in this list, I only play 1 Prodigy. Attack over the Dyna. He takes some damage. We pass. He draws into Shura. Thankfully, he doesn't have Quilute, so we crash out. Last turn for Deck Devi, he hits Malicious. So my hand is really good. I have Brain Con, Defender, and Caius. So obviously, I could just set Defender here because if he summons to try to beat over it, I have Caius. And the thing is, AJT has full knowledge of every card in my hand, and you see he even wrote it down here in the chat because of Deck Devastation Virus. So he pulls Mind Control for turn. Now, why would you keep Mind Control against Diva Hero? I don't know. But it wound up benefiting him. Because at this point, AJT has 2 plays, right? Because he has the Blizzard in his hand, as you can see. So he can go like, summon Blizzard, bring back a guy, Mind Control, attack. But the reason why he doesn't want to do that is because he knows I have Brain Control Caius. So I'll out his board. So what he does is actually a really smart play. He summons Shura, attacks, because by attacking, it forces me to summon Caius. Because I can't keep this Defender in defense because then on his draw phase, he's going to draw 2 cards. And I can't switch Defender to attack because if I switch it to attack, then he's going to get too many pluses off the Shura. So I sack the Defender for Caius, and I attack direct for 24. And at this point, I Sark for the card that I need, which is Miracle Fusion. Now, I could have Sarked for like a Deep Sea Diva because I wanted to increase the odds of me drawing a Diva. And I didn't really see this game lasting 2 turns, to be honest. So if I Sark for Diva, that's 1 less Diva that I can draw because it's in the banish zone. Whereas Miracle Fusion, is not as impactful as drawing a Diva at this point. Because Diva I can combo with Brain Control, and Diva I can also combo with the Malicious that I have in my grave. So I really want to draw Diva, and that's why I start for Miracle Fusion instead of Deep Sea Diva. Now, AJT follows up with the turn that he had premeditated, which was a really good play. Blizzard, bring back Shura, Mind Control, my Caius, and makes a level 8. So now his field is Thought Ruler and Shura. So he's in a good spot. But if I pull Deep Sea Diva, he loses, right? Because I can go summon Diva, get another Diva, banish Mali for Mali, make a level 8 Synchro, likely Dark End, and then I can go Brain Control his Shura, make Goyu Guardian, Dark End send his Thought Ruler Archfiend, attack, game. So if I pull Diva, it's over. That's it. One of 3 Divas. And even if I pull a Miracle Fusion, right? That's still, it's not game, but it puts me in a winning position, right? However, for turn, I draw an Allure. So I'm like, okay, it's not fine. It's not the end of the world because I can still potentially draw like some broken Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So what I do here, banish Mali for Mali to increase the odds of me not drawing this Malicious because I need it to win. So I banish Mali for Mali, set Brain Control, activate Blind Allure, and I draw into double Miracle Fusion after banishing one with Gold Sark. That's so comical. So, I mean, upon seeing that, like, I'm like, okay, well, that's just game. I can't Brain Control the Thought Ruler because you can just pay 1,000. And even though I attack here, like, it's game, right? He summons Breaker, attacks, and that's the set. So really, really good set against AJTBLS. And that concludes the Swiss round. So on to the next top 16. Okay, so top 16, I'm up against Yomero. And unfortunately, this is where the fun comes to an end. As you can see, I opened up pretty poorly. And once again, Creature Swamp is a card that I will not be playing in the future. However, even though I didn't open up the absolute best, these 2 traps are really good against Gladiator Beast because I can bottomless his Bestiary. So anyway, I go first. I do win the RPS, which is great. I Dust Shoot him, and I knew this was the end of my run when I activated Trap Dust Shoot and he didn't have a single monster in his hand. I was like, okay, it's going to be one of those kind of games. So I Dust Shoot him, so I just go -1. Of course, on the bright side, I do get full hand knowledge, and I know he doesn't really have much. I Gold Sark here for Rhoda. He goes Proving Ground for Darius. I say okay, because what I want to do is I want to bait out his Bestiary. That way when he summons it, I can activate Bottomless Trap Hole. And my plan worked. Or it would have worked, but Yomero, being a top duelist, chains Shrink. So that actually reduces Bestiary's attack, and now he's not destroyed. So here I think about what to do, and I summon Defender. The reason why I summon Defender is because I can't take the chance of him having another Gladiator Beast, or drawing another Gladiator Beast during his draw phase, and then making Geyserius. So I summon, I activate Creature Swamp, switch both targets, attack, and I set Econ and Deck Devi as bait. He draws into a dead card, Jar of Greed, and then he finally draws into a real card, Cyber Dragon, which is a really interesting list that he's maining Cyber Dragons in his Gladiator Beast list. And I knew that this Cyber Dragon was problematic because my only defense to the Cyber Dragon is Econ. And let's say that I allow the Cyber Dragon attack to go through. Cyber Dragon will attack over his Bestiary. I know he has Call of the Haunted because of Trap Dust Shoot. So then he can activate Call of the Haunted, bring back his Bestiary, attack, tag out, and just things can go south real fast. So I'm like, okay, I need to Econ this Cyber Dragon, put it in defense, and hope to draw some out to it on my turn, right? Not to mention, if he brings back a Gladiator Beast, I also know that he has Chariot, and I'm getting Rhoda the next turn. So ideally, I want to Rhoda for Stratos, and like if I go summon Stratos effect, then he can just go War Chariot, right? So I needed to activate Econ and switch that to defense. So he sets his whole hand, and I click those back rows there so I can know what he set to what zone. I draw Spine Gilman, which is comical, of course. Activate Rhoda for Stratos, and Stratos effect, add Diamond Dude. Now here, this play was quite interesting, right? Because I summoned Stratos because I knew that he has War Chariot, and I know he's going to try to destroy his bestiary as soon as possible. That way he can bring it back with Call of the Haunted. However, in hindsight, because I knew what all of his back rows were, because once again, I've been seeing it through Deck Devastation Virus, I should have not summoned Stratos here. What I should have did is I actually should have set or summoned, it doesn't matter because he doesn't have Bottomless, Spine Gilman, and then activate Miracle Fusion and bring out Absolute Zero. Now, with Absolute Zero, if I attack with Zero and he activates Deep Prison, the Deep Prison that I know he has, it's fine because then he loses his Cyber Dragon. And I'm free to attack direct with Bestiary. So here, attacking with Stratos was not the right play because by attacking with Stratos, he deprisons the Stratos. And now I don't have access to any heroes. Any water monsters, right? I already had a hero in the grave, which was Defender. But like this could have been the water access right here that I summoned. Instead, I attempted to put a second hero where I should have just went Hero Water, play Miracle Fusion. Because now he's going to attack over his Bestiary. He's going to attack into Rediari. Rediari is going to take out my remaining hero. And then I can't normal summon both Spine Gilman and Diamond Dude. So I won't have Hero Water access, so this Miracle Fusion becomes dead, right? So in hindsight, that's what I should have did. So he activates Jar, he attacks here, runs over his Bestiary, and just as predicted, brings it back with Call of the Haunted, attacks, there's nothing I can do because this is just a Deck Devastation Virus. Bam, takes out my hero access. I draw into Malicious, don't activate the effect because I know he has Chariot. I attack, he shrinks, I take damage. He tags out, Bestiary, pops the back row. He draws, attacks, and this game's over. Once Gladiator Beast gets the advantage, it's really, really hard to make a comeback. And he's Rediaring everything. I draw into Heavy Storm, but like it just doesn't do anything with the hand that I have. So, yes, that was definitely hindsight. Now, game 2, of course, I'm not happy because I open up Fufu, but the Molly's in my hand and the Spine Gilman's in my hand again. So I start for D-Draw and I set, and I'm like, I'll be fine as long as he doesn't have Heavy Storm. He normal summons, and usually, like I said, I like to wait for the Bestiary. But the thing is, in this particular scenario, I can't wait for the Bestiary because, one, he could have a card like Book of Moon or Shrink, like he did last time. And two, I need this Future Fusion to be alive if I have any chance of winning this game. So, I bottomless the Rediari. I don't attack because if I attack and he has a card like D-Prison, then there's nothing that I can do to protect my Future Fusion, right? 17 is actually quite big for Gladiator Beast because really the only card that they can beat over it is like with Laquari, and one Laquari is already gone, right? And that Laquari he Proven Ground for. So it's just like odds are he can't beat over 17. But he has Shrink, so he's able to attack and he's able to tag out. Bestiary takes out the Future Fusion, set 2 back rows. I get my D-Draw, D-Draw the Mali. Thankfully it's good. We go Banish Mali for Mali. And here we make Stardust, but no effect because we need to play around pulling the rug. Anyway, we make Stardust and we go Miracle Fusion, Banish, and we set both. Because right now, there's no point in attacking into like a D-Prison. Because I was afraid at this point of him having like D-Prison and Chariot or Mirror Force Chariot, right? So it's like if I attack, he goes Mirror Force, Attributes Negate, and he goes Chariot. And I lose my whole board. And at that point, I just lose the set, right? So I'm like, well, I have Decree, so I can wait one turn. He's not going to be able to get past a board of Stardust and Absolute Zero without Brain Control. But he summons Neospatian Grand Mole. And that was unexpected because that kind of forced me to activate Skill Drain. Now, Skill Drain against Gladiator Beast, not bad because they become all vanilla monsters. And with both the cards I have on the field, they can both operate under Skill Drain. I can still Tribute to Negate, and Zero's effect will still resolve. So this board is like quite good against Gladiator Beast. So he changed Trap Stun, and that's actually just a bit annoying, right? Now, obviously, I could chain Decree, but then like it's the same as his Trap Stun, so Decree doesn't do anything here. So my Stardust gets sent back. I draw into a Miracle Fusion, and I can activate it, but the reason why I don't go for it is because I want to wait until I'm able to apply a little bit more pressure. So he sets a back row. I go Gold Sark, and I Gold Sark for Beast King, which is the pressure that I was waiting on. He sets a monster. and then I draw into Rhoda. So like everything's like shaping up. I go attack finally, because at this point, like I can't allow him to keep monsters on the field because he could potentially do something with this bestiary. He sets 2 back rows, and at this point I'm like, all right, it's time, because my Beast King's coming during this turn, and he has 5 back rows. So I add my Beast King, Rhoda for Stratos, activate the effect, because now his effect is live because Royal Decree's on the field, so skill drain's not negating him anymore. And at this point, we go Allure, we banish the guy, we go Heavy Storm, he's halved, it's fine. We attack here, attack direct, set Bottomless, pass our turn. We know he has Grand Mole. MSTs, we're not worried about a Grand Mole. I just put it in the grave instantly. And I calculate all the math, summon and attack, and we manage to clutch out the victory. So that's game 2. Very, 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 very intense game. And that brings us to the final tournament game. Now, if you look at my opening hand, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's actually quite good. So here we have 2 options. We can summon Diva and activate the effect, or we can summon Diamond Dude. Now the thing is, if we summon Diva and activate the effect, that can be really good because we can establish a strong monster on the board before activating skill drain. But I actually elected to summon Diamond Dude, and the reason why I did that is because I wanted to save this combination, Mind Control and Deep Sea Diva, in case a problematic card comes. I wasn't too worried about him resolving any effects because I have skill drain. So, and also it looked to me that he had a monster shortage too. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to rock out with this Diamond Dude, and we're going to set 1 and pass. He summons, he attacks. I take 200 and he tags out into Bestiary. I go skill drain, and at this point he just sets 2 back rows and he passes. All right, so now I'm like, okay, what's the best play to do? So I go summon, and I make Stardust. So now my board is Stardust and skill drain. A really, really powerful board. It's really difficult for Glad Beast to out skill drain and Stardust, let alone both together. So I attack direct for 25 because I don't believe him, and I set return. So I'm just chilling. And he comes back with one of the most amazing plays ever. He goes Shrink, and I'm like, okay, Shrink is fine. Like I lose my Stardust, but it's not a big deal because I can still draw into many other cards like Miracle Fusion. But not only does he do that, he activates Trap Stun, chains it to Darius's effect, and then he's able to make Geyserius, pop both my back rows, and set 2. And at this point, I just have MST Caius. I have no way to bring out the Caius because I don't have Treeborn access. I don't have a Miracle Fusion. I set MST. MST is my MST. And as you can see, at this point, the game is just over. I knew from this turn right here that like this was the end of my tournament run. GBs took me out. I mean, GBs took everybody out also at RBT New York. He's banishing my Waters. He's setting up a board where he can make Herclinos the following turn. I draw in Torrential. I set it. He makes Herc. And then like I don't even bother activating Torrential. So I just wish him GG. And that, my friends, was my peak of the Beak 6 tournament run. So overall, lots of good Yugis played. I'm really happy with how the deck performed. You know, I got some spice in the works, and you know, to all my fans who've been supporting me, I really appreciate it. Check me out on Discord, check me out on Patreon, check me out on Facebook, check me out, you know. With that, guys, ATrueHero out. Peace. I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I would like to take this time to give a special shout out to my Patreons, Televisual, and Enraged Peacock. For those of you who are looking for exclusive content, please subscribe to my Patreon. The link will be in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, ATrueHero out. Peace.
Subscribe or you too will be sent to the Shadow Realm.